126. Traps B3. Look, old man, if you're not going to tell us how you got that info, why the hell should we believe a word coming out of your mouth? The whole fighting thing makes sense in a way since that's all we've been doing this whole time, but defending the gate to our last breath in some final stand type of situation. This isn't a damn movie. That was Renee, the other green armor-clad woman who sat with us. Grandpa had explained what we knew of the gate and more about what we knew of the reality of Phase 3 and the phases that followed it. We did our best to emphasize just how important it would be to fight like our lives depended on it, because it did. What my new guard captain didn't know is if we would be able to retreat through the gate if the fighting got too tough. She doubted it, but there was a chance it was possible and would be seen by the system as a loss. That obviously couldn't happen, and going in through the gate believing that would be possible simply wouldn't be a good idea either. We needed to go in there with the understanding that coming out was only going to be possible if we won. But I really didn't need anyone just how we got our hands on that information, and well, I also didn't feel the need to come up with an excuse of how we did to tell these women. Grandpa seemed to agree. Young lady, I will treat you with respect, and I ask that you do the same for me. Now I understand why you're getting a little frustrated with the information I shared and not knowing whether it's believable or not, but we have bigger fish to fry. We are going to be fighting beyond that gate, and losing means death now if you don't want to work with us. That's fine. I really don't give a damn, but you will stay out of our way. I hope you take that to heart. And with that, Grandpa motioned to stand up from the table, and the rest of us was about to follow when we were interrupted. Wait, please wait. We stopped, and Grandpa slowly sat back down, looking at both women calmly. I'm sorry, there's been a whole lot going on lately, and you wouldn't be the first person to come sharing so-called urgent news only for it to be a damn trap, and we've gotten burned for it. I spoke up there. A trap? Who the hell is setting traps at a time like this? Both women turned their gazes toward me, and their faces darkened. Sounds like y'all came from a nice place then, but it hasn't been all peaches and cream where we were. The second the aliens stopped attacking us, the enemy became our very own people. You don't know how many arguments and fights we've had to stop over various resources. Eventually, someone got the bright idea to try and lure us away, and it's not really a happy memory. How about we leave it there then? There'll be plenty of time to discuss further after we clear this gate and come home. I nodded at Grandpa, and their conversation continued. It was mostly a discussion about tactics from that point on, and it honestly boiled down to let the heavy hitters work and just focus on supporting. Renee and Haley didn't seem to have a problem with that at all. Both women could obviously fight if they made to E grade, but they were apparently much better in group fights. It's just that they were the only two of their group to make it to E grade in time for the gate. Now I didn't want to start acting like an arrogant fool, but the fact remains that I'm strong. Even now, I didn't feel any sort of threat coming from either women. It was a sense that I was still working through myself since it wasn't a skill or anything like that. But Asania felt extremely strong to me. These two, nor anyone else in my family came close to giving me the same feeling. I would rather not have to worry about my attacks hitting them, especially since I kinda didn't have a reliable spear, and would be fighting up close and personal with whoever they threw at us. Now, while I didn't plan being arrogant, I was going to be a little selfish. I promised to myself that these people would regret the day they touched down on Earth and would have to pay an irredeemable price for killing my uncles. The anger I felt about that has never gone away. I've just kept it under wraps, slowly waiting for the day I could let it loose. That time was near. For now, I allowed my mind to focus on Renee's words a bit more. People setting traps for one another. I mean, I know that's not unlikely, and I know how people are, but traps. To kill? All for the sake of resources just when we are still fighting the red people. The only thing we've faced was a few idiots trying to stake their claim over the dungeons in Laja. But I suppose it would have been a similar result if my family and I were weak. If we were so easily trampled on, then what was going to stop? I think his name was John. Haven't seen him in a long time, but what was going to stop him from actually taking a hold of the city? The answer was nothing. Might is right, and we have it in spades, so we were right. Renee and her group likely did not have it in spades, but enough that it sounds like their group were the ones in power and also controlling resources. There would be no need to set a trap to lure them away, as she put it, if they weren't in control of something. This brings me back to Grandpa's wish right after we got rid of all the lava people. He wanted to rule Laja with an iron fist and take charge of everything and anything happening in the city. We kind of talked him out of it, and now I guess it isn't too far to say we rule it with a soft fist in a way. We weren't really dictating what everyone did or didn't do, but we were definitely in a position to sway all of Laja one way or another. In a situation like I wonder what was better. There could always be another John, someone who wants to rule their own fist instead of allowing the Williams family to have the influence it does. But in that same vein, if we turned that same fist from soft to iron, wouldn't there be more people now inclined to resort to traps and the like to get rid of us? I suppose no matter which way you slice it, the chances of us facing problems remain the same. One way or another, people will be people. It's just that we're now in a position to ensure those people would rather not do anything to us. Whether it was due to actually liking what we brought to them, or fearing what we could do to them, or better yet, both. I suppose this what Grandpa was thinking about, maybe, were the ones who are still stuck in the past, while Grandpa was trying to adapt to a new reality ahead of time. Something to think about after this gate business, I guess. 127. A little op, B3. Eventually, we parted ways with the two women and went to find lodging of our own. We're mostly used to the process now since we had to do that a few times over the past 3 days as we made our way here. It was honestly an interesting time. We all ran like the wind pretty much, and when we couldn't run anymore, we simply set up camp somewhere. Sometimes it was on the side of whatever was left of a road, other times it was in a building no one else was using. One time we even found an old motel, which was the best find since this whole thing began according to Grandpa. They had a whole bunch of untouched coffee on hand, and I think the old man almost cried. Actually, now that I think about it, all the adults almost cried. Grandpa was just the loudest one. Not the biggest fan of coffee myself, but I did appreciate all the toilet paper that was still available. Can never have too much toilet paper. Anyway, the remaining days passed without anything exciting happening. We stayed close to the gate and simply bided our time until the countdown was down to about 30 minutes. Once it reached that point, we made our way over to the gate. Renee and Haley were present, and that was expected. What wasn't were the other people standing around the gate. There were 5 others. 3 of them stood together, all 3 were men, and the other 2 stood by themselves, 1 man and 1 woman. So a party of 3 and 2 solos. We didn't even have an hour left, so I don't think any detailed planning can take place, but Grandpa will probably want to share the big details of it. But it seems he was beaten to the punch. One of the 3 men smiled as he walked towards us, or better yet toward Grandpa, who stayed ahead of the group. He was a little shorter than Haley, who wasn't too far, and had long, messy blonde hair. He was wearing standard shop leather armor, but there was a pair of daggers on his belt, and even without touching them, I could quite literally feel how powerful they were. They were filled to the brim with mana. Interesting. Glad you all could make it, the Williams family, right? I heard you all had some extra information for us. Grandpa turned his head to Renee and Haley, who both just shrugged. They were, of course, the only ones who could have passed on information about us, but I guess it wasn't a secret, and Grandpa was going to share what he could anyway. It just kind of felt wrong. Not a big deal, though. We don't have much time, but I'll share what I can. My name is Lance, you. My name is Oscar, head of the Little Bite faction. Nice to meet you all. Grandpa shook his hand with a raised eyebrow, and I think the whole family raised an eyebrow along with him. Not only was he apparently a faction head like Grandpa was, but he went out of his way to introduce himself as such. Even more interesting. I see, well, Oscar, and this goes for everyone here, I can tell you right now that we will be fighting beyond that gate, and retreat will not be an option. If the people of Earth lose control of all the gates, then our subjugation ends here. Those red bastards win, and we all die. Obviously, that's not something we want to happen, so the plan is simple. My grandson here is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I can't tell you what to do, but I recommend staying out his way and focusing on supporting as much as possible. High attacks can be a bit volatile in nature. I was getting a little embarrassed by Grandpa describing like some mindless brute, and I was sure he was doing it on purpose, but I just held my tongue. Even as all the eyes in the area turned toward me, I just kept a straight face as I looked at Grandpa. The plan wasn't a surprise to me, of course, and whether Oscar here or anyone else agreed to it didn't matter one bit. I was going to go on a rampage, and my family knew to stay out of the way. I knew I wasn't the only one who wanted to let their rage run free, so they would let it run freely where they could. But wherever the majority of the Red People's forces were, then that is where I'll be, and anything in that area will be crushed. I didn't need anyone to tell me that revenge was bad, or I was being too bloodthirsty, or any bullshit like that. I really didn't give a damn. Ever since that fateful day when they swooped in on those big-ass bird and destroyed my grandpa's boat, they had it coming. Ever since I had to take my first life and be haunted by nightmares of a red eye that I will never forget. Ever since they destroyed my city, killed more people than I could count, and worst of all, took my uncles. Ever since then, they had signed their own death certificates. Everyone here was preparing to defend a gate, to fight to the last breath and all that jazz. That was good, and it would be the right thing to do, but that was for them. I wasn't going there to defend, not one bit. Alert, all gates are now being opened. Alert, all gates are now being opened. Alert, all gates are now being opened. The second the 30 minutes ran out, 3 new alerts flashed across my face, and this time Grandpa wasn't standing in front of our little family unit. I strode ahead and they all fell in line behind me. No words were said. No encouragement was needed. The gate parted and all I could see beyond it was an immense white light. I stepped through it without an ounce of hesitation, and I immediately found myself in a white space, kind of like when I evolved to the E-grade. For a second, I thought for a second that God decided to interfere with me again, but a few system messages greeted me instead. Welcome to Planet Vika. Phase 3 of the world subjugation will officially commence. Defend the gates or face destruction. That was all it said, and honestly, I don't think it needed to say much more than that. It was a much simpler version than what Asania had explained to me, but I got the gist of it. I just hope for the sake of the other E-grades at their own respective gates, that they understood the gravity of what was to come. Not only was retreating not really an option, but the Red people should know that as well, and that meant they would throw everything they could at us. If they went through the gate with half a resolve, then only death would await them. And as much as I wanted to kill and seek revenge, I wasn't blinded by rage in the slightest. I was early E-grade at best, and I could realistically be facing people at the peak of E-grade, more than just a few levels above me. But this class of mine wasn't called Princeling for nothing. If this was a story and I was the MC, then this is the part where I would start to become a little op. 128, countdown B3, it was time. The words of the system disappeared, and I could soon begin to hear shouting. It was all gibberish, really. I couldn't understand a single bit of it. But it still wasn't coming through very clearly. It took a couple of seconds more as the white light cleared to the point that I could finally see, and with that, all the shouting hit me at once, along with the view around me. I was standing in a valley of sorts. To my left and to my right were towering cliffs that stretched seemingly forever in both directions. The entire valley was red, the ground and the cliffs alike. Well, I suppose it's not really red, but more so a burnt kind of orange. Whatever it is, this wasn't Earth, and it was obvious when I looked out in front of me. In the distance, there was a camp of sorts, or better yet a military outpost. I couldn't see any walls, but it definitely looked like something that would be defendable under siege. But that was in the distance. Far closer to me, and what I could make out clear as day, was an army. A few thousand black armored red people gathered themselves in orderly lines, and the shouting ended in front of them, where about 100 members of what I assumed to be the group of lava people that attacked us stood. After that came another 12 people that I guessed were the E-grade versions of those same lava people. This was only an assumption based on how they were standing. I couldn't really feel them all that well from here. But that wasn't all. At the head of their group was an old woman. While the red people were humanoid, they had their differences beyond the most obvious being their red skin, but it appeared old age looked the same for both of our races. Wrinkles, things people did their best to get rid of as they grew older. I never understood why. It appeared the old woman before me felt the same way, or maybe there was just no way to get rid of them. Whatever the case, she had wrinkles, and even her hair, while not quite gray, looked a dull shade darker than everyone else. But that did not mean the old woman looked weak. It was the opposite, in fact. Even from here, while I couldn't feel the power of the others behind her, she was burning with strength. Without a shadow of a doubt, she was strong. I'm sure she was likely some elder or some general or something of that nature, especially since she wasn't dressed in the same armor as everyone behind her. Instead, she wore pristine orange robes, and I'm sure they didn't lack for durability. She herself gave one last shout of something, and the army responded in kind before settling back down. This probably wasn't the time to think about it, but my mind seemed to circle around the fact that I indeed couldn't understand her, and I was fine. I could never understand the red people since the day they descended on our planet. What bothered me, though, was the fact that I could understand the acolyte and my new guard captain. They spoke perfect English to me. There were no missing words or mispronunciations or anything out of order, and I'm a bit ashamed of myself that it only comes across as weird now. Why couldn't I understand the red people, but I could understand them clearly, and they could understand me? Did they learn English to come to Earth, or was there more system fuckery at play here? What about people of other languages on Earth itself? Surely the system didn't send them messages in English too, right? Has to be system fuckery. But I wonder why it didn't apply to the red people. Anyway, before my thoughts continued to spiral further, I looked over at the reason no one had moved to attack each other as of yet. An almost entirely transparent barrier encircled us, and there was a timer counting down that had a little under 5 minutes remaining on it. It's only been a couple of seconds since we stepped foot on the planet, and I knew everyone was taking stock of the situation like I was in their own ways. But eventually, we would need to reaffirm our little game plan, especially since we actually knew what we were set to face. Wasting these minutes staring at the enemy wouldn't do us any good, plus I had a few items to set up. Getting ready to place down the beacon thing, I fully expected Grandpa to start doing his thing soon, but he was beaten to the punch once again. "All right, Mr. Grandson, Lance there said O would serve as our wrecking ball, so I'm going to assume you want the alien at the front all to yourself, right?" He placed his hand on my shoulder as he walked up, and his hand it was shaking as he held me. His facial expression didn't look that serious, but his eyes and his grip betrayed any outward sense of courage he was trying to portray. He was scared, or at the minimum, very nervous. I took another look back out towards the waiting army, and a weird feeling settling on me. When was it? When did I become someone that could look on at an army of thousands, that would wish for nothing more than to rip me to shreds, when I didn't even have 50 people at my back to support me? I didn't know. What I did know was that Oscar probably wasn't the only one who felt a tinge of nervousness or maybe even scared shitless. I cast a gaze across everyone else, and that was quickly proven true. Even some people in my family had trembling eyes as they gazed upon our opponents. Almost all of them too stunned to speak. I paused my actions for a moment, nodded at Oscar, and turned to look at everyone else. I'm not really one for speeches, but I should probably say something here, I think. All right, everyone, there's a whole lot of them, and not too many of us, but don't worry, Only few at the very front are E grades like us. The rest of them are all F grade. The old one in the front is the biggest threat, but that's my responsibility for the rest of you. Use range attacks if you can and try not to stay in one place. Once this kicks off, I'm sure there will be a whole bunch of things flying our way. Stay back, and I'll do my best to deal with the first volley before rushing in. No one said anything for a few moments before Grandpa spoke up. Spoken like a true Williams. All right, everyone, we only have a few more minutes. If you got any kind of range abilities, let it be known now. That's the Grandpa I know and love. I shot a glance to my dad, and he gave me a stern nod. My mother, on the other hand, looked as if she had a lot more to say, but instead followed suit with a nod. A whole bunch of rapid-fire conversation began after that as the rest of them got organized, whilst I finally planted the beacon thing, and after a few seconds it just began to beep quietly. Leaving it alone, I took out the pocket camera thing, covered it in mana for a second, and turned on, then floated above me by itself. I'm sure it was already recording. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the very edge of the barrier and watched as the time slowly but surely made its way to 0. Eventually, the talking behind me stilled, and everyone stood waiting for what was to come. The minutes soon became just 1, and then that too went from double digits to single digits. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ocean S. Maw. 129. Oscar B3 POV Oscar. This whole alien, magic, fantasy attack on Earth thing has been way better for me than I could ever hope for. Working as a cashier for a local burger joint wasn't doing a whole lot for me. My family was trailer park trash, and even they didn't accept me. Things weren't really looking up for me, but I've always wanted to be more, to do more. And when those chains showed up in the sky and red aliens swooped down on those birds, I knew this was going to be my time to shine. That or the latest batch of pills I got my hands on were way crazier than I thought they were. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, not that I would have minded it, but I'd say this is way better. Shit was pretty bad for a while, but when had anything ever been good for me in Northeast Ohio? People died left and right, and I had to hide and claw my way up for a while, but I did eventually carve out a nice little place for myself. It was all thanks to the Dungeon of Fangs. I thought with all my heart that it was going to be a den of vampires, and I really didn't want to go in there. But when aliens give you lemons, you got no choice but to make lemonade. Or in this case, jump into a den of wolves. The place was wild. It was a massive, wide, open forest that the aliens didn't or couldn't follow me through. It even rained on occasion, 100% like being in a whole different world. But it wasn't all safe and sound there. Wolves of all shapes and sizes roamed all over the place, and some of them had the craziest of abilities. Thankfully for us humans, they weren't all united in there, and it left room for us to either pick some off or even come in after a group of them had done battle and clean up the injured ones. It wasn't easy, of course, and people died in that dungeon, but for those of us who survived, it was like finding $1 in the couch while searching for the remote. Sweet bliss. I managed to level up quicker than everyone else, and found out after a while that some wolves guarded treasures. For the most part, it was something edible, but sometimes you could find weapons, coins, books, or even clothes. I might have been a college dropout back in the day, but I wasn't dumb enough to ignore that treasure I saw before me. And with my strength, I built a nice little force who took control of who entered and who came out, and that force quickly became a faction that ruled the area. And people put up with us, because we made sure to protect them from any attacks from neighbors and aliens alike. Plus, I wasn't dictator. Even I paid enough attention in school to know that was stupid. That didn't mean I didn't like being in charge, though, and I was good at it. This gate business was supposed to be just like that. Show up, meet the other E-grades in the area, do some networking, beat some aliens, and continue to grow from a small community to my own damn country. That was until I came through that gate, saw the system's message, and witnessed that fucking army led by a old beast of a woman who sent shivers down my back just looking at her. Honestly, I didn't care one bit about some old man telling me was grandson of all people was going to handle the fighting. But after seeing what we had to fight, I prayed to whoever was listening that the brat was stronger than he looked. I couldn't lie and say he didn't feel strong in a weird way since standing next to him felt oddly heavy, but he still looked like he should be preparing for prom soon. Why would I depend on someone like that? No, I had no choice. Then he gave us a little speech that made me feel a bit more hope, and when the barrier finally dropped and my heart along with it, Mr. Grandson shouted 2 words, and the damn sky shook as gigantic head of some mythical monster appeared out of nothing, and it roared forward with the strength and power of a rocket, as Mr. Grandson took off running behind it. The air itself getting heavier and heavier as he ran. It was getting kind of hard to stand until it started going back down, right as he neared the old alien woman who had her hands raised with a deadly serious look on her face. For a second it felt like the words slowed down to a crawl as Mr. Grandson leaped into the air, and 2 twin turns of powerful lava shot out from the old woman, both of them as thick as a light pole, and they twisted up into the air towards Mr. Grandson, and his mythical water thing came crashing down towards her. Lava then met mythical water beast. BOOMs. It was the type of explosion that would put a Transformer movie to shame, and the wind from it blew all the way back to us. It was hot. For a second there, nothing really happened, and steam flooded the area around them. Then it was chaos. All manner of attacks from arrows and spears to bullets made of lava shot to the center of the steam cloud, and as steam began to clear extremely fast from the flurry of attacks flying around, and then I heard something that I think will stick with me till the end of my life. From within the disappearing steam cloud came a loud, booming shout. "Get on the fucking ground!" So much mana flooded the area that I could swear it was almost visible, and while I couldn't really see the old woman anymore, from those I could see, knees slammed into the ground like there was a chain attached to them and dragged them down. Mr. Grandson was a certified badass, holy fucking shit. I owe him a goddamn beer from my secret stash. "It's our turn now. Don't let Freddy hog all the fun." The voice pulled me out of my trance to see his grandfather with a bundle of spears tucked under his stump, and one gripped in his remaining good arm take off running towards the battle with a maddened grin on his face. That seemed to rouse everyone else, and then we all took off running. Sadly, most of us were melee fighters, and the ones who could attack from range couldn't do much from this far back, so we all had to get closer anyway. I pulled my twin fangs from my waist and took off running right alongside the old man, my 2 faction members right behind me, both with grim expressions on their faces. We were crazy for this. But I would be damned if Mr. Grandson came back from murdering aliens and found out the little bite faction didn't pull our own weight. The last thought that crossed my mind as I neared the enemy was one thing, and one thing only. Never fuck with the Williams family. 130. Bam. B3. Lava of all different shapes and sizes came flying in towards me like I was stuck inside a Category 5 hurricane. The actual application of the lava was pretty much the same as the F-grade zone, except there was far more control and power involved. The lava wasn't being used only in rigid, unchanging attacks, but ones that changed as I dodged and hit the ground with far more power than what the F-grade versions of these people could do. That, of course, didn't even need to cover just how much hotter it was to stand next to them. But none of that compared to that old lady and what she could do with lava. She was the reason I had burn marks across my shoulders and back, nothing too deep, and I was somehow able to resist it using my mana, which was strange, and I kind of did it unconsciously. But she didn't come out of our little engagement without injury either. In fact, she got off a bit worse. Even in the steam, which was almost clear by now, I could see that her left hand looked mangled as if it was run through the shredder. She could clearly still move it around since these massive snake-like columns of lava continuously poured out of her hands towards me. If there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that I couldn't allow myself to be caught or hit head-on with anything she personally sent after me. The power I could feel coursing through her lava was enough to give me a fright all by itself. Thankfully for me, though, I was still fast enough to evade for now, but I was struggling to buy myself enough time to actually get some real attacks in. Maybe if I had a good enough spear to help me slap some of this lava away, things would have been different. And then there was the thousands of others shooting attacks in this direction too. I didn't fear any one of those attacks individually, but all of them together could pose a bit of a problem, which is why I haven't been able to make much more headway after my opening attack. I tried using Aqua Barrage, but she was able to block any of the bullets that came anywhere close to hitting her. The only other attack after that was the grip thing, but I have a really strong feeling it would either take a ridiculously large chunk of mana from me or wipe it completely, and that would be if it even worked on her. Too big a risk to take right now, but I might have no choice here soon, because being on the back foot like this wasn't gonna work forever. Something had to give eventually, and as if on cue, a spear came flying in from the direction I came in from. Then another. Then a few arrows, and a ball of blue fire came cascading in next. Honestly, that last one probably wouldn't hurt people who wielded lava all that much, but all of that combined did everything I needed it to do. It forced the old woman to shit her attention away from me. It wasn't a long time, seconds at best, but by the time her eyes refocused on me and began to wield her flowing columns of lava back at me again, it was too late. The second I saw the spear come swooping in, I planted my feet, and with all the strength this E-grade body of mine could muster, I shot out like a bullet twisting past the columns of lava, and any stray attacks coming in my direction. I had forced quite a few of them to their knees with a roaring shout, but I couldn't keep that up forever either. But they'll be getting my full attention soon, and very soon. For now, my hand cocked back and my fist was squeezed tightly, as the old woman shifted her eyes back to me, and they slowly widened as she realized where I was. I punched the shit out of her. Bam! She staggered back as blood quickly leaked out of her face, and before she bring the lava down on me, I took another step forward and my other hand rocked her again in the face. Bam! The lava she was controlling fell apart as she lost hold of the mana within herself for a few moments, but credit to her. She was already trying to create space and reform her columns of lava, but I wasn't done. My fists rained down on her face like the gavel of justice in the heart of a criminal. I wanted her to feel every blow, not just physically, but mentally as well. This was it. This what you brought down on yourself by attacking Earth. We didn't ask for this, you did. H. Bam, bam, bam. Punch after punch after punch turned her face into a mangled mess of blood and gore. At some point, I felt a needle of lava pierce through my side, and the pain stung like a motherfucker, but I pushed on, delivering another blow to the old woman who staggered back one final time and fell. Breathing heavily as blood dripped from my fists, I turned my gaze to the chaos in front of me. Grandpa and the other melee fighters of not just my family, but the other E-grades that gathered were fighting back against a group of E-grades and a whole host of the regular ones, while the few ranged attackers were standing in the back and doing the best they could to help. If nothing changed beyond this, they would probably lose soon. Everyone was holding their own relatively well, but it would only be a matter of time before simple numbers overwhelmed them. That was before I put down the old woman. I spent a few seconds combing over my body to understand my current state, and I was bleeding in more places than I realizing. Nothing too bad, but some a bit worse than others. But as of right now, adrenaline was probably numbing most of the pain I should have been feeling. There was definitely pain, but it was like muted in a way. So let's not waste any more time. Aqua Barrage roared to life behind me as I manifested bullet after bullet and sent them flying to the mess of enemies around me. Not aiming at anyone in particular, and just towards where too many of them stood near each other. I didn't even bother to check whether they were dead or not, and any kill notifications were promptly ignored. Apart from that, I did my best to pay attention to the battlefield and tried to see who needed the most help. Of course, I checked my family first, but they seemed to be all right. Renee, on the other hand, was about to get skewered through by a lance of lava. She seemed prepared to dodge in some way, but likely would still get hit. I held out my hand and cast Abyss, verdict towards the attacker. He was crushed into a bloody heap, and Renee shot me a look of part fear and thanks. I didn't have time to worry about that right now. There was more of them to kill. 131. Over for now B3, POV Jennifer. The day he was born was the greatest day of my life, and every day after that was greater than the previous. Raising Freddie brought me nothing but joy, and his father was the best husband a woman could ever need. The entire Williams family was probably the best set of in-laws anyone could ever ask for, was just a cherry on top. I didn't marry my husband for them, but they welcomed me with open arms, and now I don't know what I'd do without them. There were good times and plenty of bad to go with it, like any family, but no lines were ever crossed, and all in all, things were usually on the brighter side of things. Especially since Mr. Lance would never allow his children, in-laws or not, to become too unruly. He would rather grab his sons by the collars and rough them up a bit than to allow them to get disrespectful. He was even worse when it was someone outside of the family causing problems for one of the Williams. He was a kind and loving old man, but if he pushed in the wrong direction, he could be a ruthless old man in a blink. It took some time for me to get used to that, but after a while I realized he was nothing but a guardian for the family. Leave the family alone and he would be friendly like a dog, always laughing and joking with everyone. Take a step wrong, and that dog would transform into Cerberus before your very eyes. Actually, I think he wrote about something similar in one of his books once. Regardless, that is who I would expect to be filled with rage right now. It wouldn't be out of place for him to go on a killing spree against the people who took his sons from him and destroyed his home, not to mention his boat named after his late wife. That is who I expected to look like a murderous demon. But that wasn't the case. Mr. Lance looked angry, yes, but rage wasn't coloring his eyes. He was in control of his emotions, and he was far more concerned with keeping the rest of us safe than he was in trying to kill more red people. My precious son, on the other hand, even as I loosed another arrow that pierced through the midsection of someone aiming their own arrow at my husband, I watched as Freddie raised his hand and did something. Then the target of his aim was crushed. It looked as if someone had the misfortune of falling into a trash compactor by the time he was done, and he didn't even blink. It still stung me each time I was forced to take a life in defense, but I wouldn't hesitate in doing so if it meant protecting my family. I've long since gotten over that hesitation when they were threatening the lives of the people I love. But I didn't enjoy it, and I hated every second of every fight I've been forced to participate in. This is not the life I wanted, and it's definitely not the life I wanted for my son. And the look in his eyes as his gaze flowed to a man who was charging towards me filled me with pain. I likely could have sent an arrow through his chest before he reached me, but it would have been close. Freddie, on the other hand, took one step and was by his side in an instant, wrapping his hand around his neck and squeezing. He crushed the man's neck and threw his body with a roar towards another one. All the while, his bullets of water kept shooting out without rest, and the noise they made when crashing into their bodies didn't sound like the splashing of water. His body was covered in both small and somewhat large wounds and plenty of blood, but thankfully none of them looked particularly serious. Once he verified my relative safety, at least as safe as I was going to be, he shot me a nod and a tight smile before shooting off toward someone else. His next target was the Oscar fellow who was barely holding his own against 3 different opponents. He had a large bleeding wound on his left thigh, and at this point he was barely moving. The only reason he was still alive was because of the support of his 2 followers and a few timely arrows I've sent his way. There was also his own ability at play, and those fang daggers of his seemed to grow at will. But his current situation wouldn't be getting better anytime soon. That was until Freddie reached them. One of his opponents was crushed again, while he sent his right hand forward in a fist to the back of another's head, which allowed Oscar to drive one of his fang daggers in the neck of the last one. Freddy didn't even spare Oscar a glance before he stormed off again. This time he was heading straight into the teeth of the enemy and roared out once more. "Ocans Maw." His shout thundered over the battlefield, and that monster of an skill showed up in the sky before crashing down on the gathered red people. Then he did it again. And agains. And agains. And agains. 4 times that monster of water showed up and roared out before reaping the lives who knows how many of the enemies. At some point, I lowered my bow in shock as all the enemies stopped focusing on us and sent all their attacks towards my son. And Freddy unleashed another attack of the water monster, and then he did something that sent shivers down my spine. He raised both of his hands and called out an attack. Abyss Verdict. It caused him to stagger a bit, but at least 20 different people were crushed again. There was silence as everything seemed to freeze at what they just witnessed, and the noise was broken by 2 things. The sound of the few remaining red people screaming and running for their lives, and my precious son, taking a powerful step toward the back of the retreating enemies with a mad glint in his eyes. He likely would have reached them without issue, but I didn't realize when Mr. Lance and my husband showed up at his sides and grabbed him. At that point, I hated just how much better my eyes were now because I could see the rage in his face as he snapped his head towards his father. Tears welled up in my eyes as he yelled something at him. What about MYUNCLES, Dad? Did they stop when Uncle TERRANCE and Uncle Grant cried out? His father had a pained expression on his face, but he didn't bother responding with words. He just shook his head and embraced him. Freddy was definitely strong enough to break free of that embrace, but with every ounce of my body I was glad that he didn't. Freddy was still in there. My baby boy was still there. I looked on as his shoulders bobbed slightly from what must be crying. As I watched him cry, the pain I was feeling at his state slowly shifted to anger, and I didn't realize when Abigail showed up at my side and placed a hand on my bow that was raised once more and an arrow already nocked. Realizing what I was about to do towards the retreating red people, I closed my eyes tightly and squeezed my bow. It's over, for now it was over. 132. Move forward, B3, the Vicar's someone who could usually move with impunity throughout his planet. Not only was he the only D-grade on the planet, but he was at the peak of the grade, the planet's progenitor, and by the law of his people he was their lone ruler. There was nothing on Vika that he didn't have access to. Of course, that was only until Phase 3 of the subjugation began, and his authority was suddenly restricted. The system had directed its attention on Vika in full, and he could no longer approach certain areas on the planet. 11 of them, in fact, all of which was the location of a gate that the humans of Earth would walk through. He couldn't even cast his eyes directly on the immediate surroundings of any of those 11 locations. He understood what was happening, and he wouldn't fight against the system, but it wasn't supposed to get this far, and the fact he wasn't allowed to play a single part in the phase brought him no small amount of anger. But he did the best he could. They only had enough High Elders to cover 8 of the 11 gates, so the last 2 had tens of thousands of F grades and a few young E grades to handle them. He didn't expect either group to win, but they just had to hold on until one of the High Elders cleared their own gate. Regardless of how talented and filled with potential these humans were, none of them could have possibly been E grade for even a year. So versus someone who's been at that realm for decades, the end result should be obvious. Such were the thoughts of the Vicar as he waited for reports to come in right up until the first report came. My lord, this servant humbly greets the... Out with it. Yes, my lord, High Elder Vela has perished in battle, and our forces had to retreat from Gate 4. The Vicar had to take a moment to quell his rising anger before responding. What of the others? When will support be sent? None of the other gates have been successfully claimed, yet my lord, there is no one else to send. Lava crashed around the room for a moment, And if it wasn't the sliver of sanity that remained within the vicar, he would have killed the one giving the report as well. Give up on Gate 4 for now then. Time is limited. Everyone who retreated from Gate 4 needs to go support other gates. The second one gate is clear, then the entire force should move to the next one. We do not have time to waste. He roared that last line out as his anger reached something of a crescendo. The reality of what was at stake settled on him like a knife through his chest. The only thing that was missing was a human hand to twist it. POV Fred. After my moment with my dad, something that everyone seemed to pretend didn't happen, which I was grateful for, I finally focused on all the notifications I ignored before. It was honestly just a really long list of kills and the XP they provided. What I really loved was that it gave me the total number at the end. Plus 1227360 XP gained. Plus 21 stat points gained. That was a big-ass number, and that wasn't a small amount of stat points either. I opened my status to see it all clearly. Name, Fred Williams. Born world, Earth, ENWPI 70059. Race, human. Faction, the Williams family. Age, 17. Grade, E. Level, 58. XP, 78,555, 187035. Mana, 167,705. Stat points, 21. Gene, 1 Abyssium Unbound. Traits. Class. Current class, Princeling of the Abyss. Class passive, Welcome to the Depths. Class grade, NA. Class rarity, NA. Skills. 1 Aqua Barrage Unbound. 2 Ocean's Maw Unbound. 3 Abyss Verdict Unbound. Attributes. Strength 164. Dexterity 125. Vitality 138. Endurance 137. Mana 141. Willpower 112. Perception 112. Intelligence 112. Also, I went straight from level 51 to 58 after all of that. The system really does reward killing other sentient beings. Though it feels kind of bittersweet, 1,000,000 XP sounds like I should get way more levels than I actually did. But I suppose it makes sense things got harder the higher you climbed. Then there were the 21 stat points to consider. If my math is correct, then I gained 3 stat points per level instead of the previous 2. Doesn't seem like a massive difference at first glance, but every point adds up at the end. But where to put them? I looked over at the silent camera that followed me throughout this battle and decided right then that I'll just wait. Perhaps my new trainer will have some input on the best way to allocate stats, since I'm sure there's a whole lot of things to consider here. Though, as of right now, I kind of wanted to dope everything I had in vitality. I wasn't doing by any means, but the wounds I had still stung. They began healing, but it was painfully slow, and I meant that literally. It would be a whole lot faster if I could find some water around here, but the valley was barren, and for the moment we didn't have plans to leave it. Aunt Kimberly was the closest thing we had to a healer at the moment, mainly because she spent her adult life working as a nurse, but she also had a very minor healing skill. She didn't have a healing class, and the only reason she even had a skill on healing is because of the Gauntlet dungeon. The skill wouldn't do much for anything too big too soon, because all it did accelerate the body's natural ability to heal. It helped her far more than it helped others, but no one would say no to extra healing. But alas, I was last in line for any healing. There were people with worse wounds than I had. No one died, but it didn't mean people would be walking away from this battle without a scratch. Even all the healing supplies we brought along quickly got used up after the battle. In fact, some of it, not much, and not until all of us, including the other people that showed up at the gate. But some of it went to the red people. None of the E grades remained alive, but not all of the F grade red people were in position where they could run. Far too injured to move. A few of them just laid on the ground waiting for death to come. As much as something within me screamed to simply finish them off, One look at my list of notifications was enough to let me know I killed more than enough. My uncles weren't going to come back. I needed to get over that. It wasn't like I was planning on murdering every single person on this planet. I've killed enough. At some point, choosing life was always going to be better than choosing death. No one was particularly happy about the choice to help, but no one fought against it either. We weren't cold-hearted killers, just a grieving family. Either way, it was time to move forward with our lives. Like, what do we do now, for example? 133. Trade talks B3. Turns out the answer to that question was, well, nothing. There was nothing to do. We still had no idea how long we would have to spend here until the phase was officially over and we could return, and no one really wanted to wander outside of the valley. Not only could we run into more enemies, but who's to say we would make it back here in time if the phase ended without warning, and we had a time limit to get back to the gate. Honestly, it wasn't worth the risk at all, so instead a small camp was set up back around where we appeared and people were settling in. Everyone wasn't suddenly fully healed, but no one was complaining too loudly anymore. Even the few red people we had given medical supplies to had walked away. Something about that still rubbed me the wrong way, but we move. So with nothing to do, at least nothing urgent, I turned my attention to the conversation that was about to begin nearby. Grandpa, Oscar, both Renee and Haley, and finally the two other people we hadn't really gotten a chance to talk with before this all started. Well, that's not entirely true. I didn't talk with them, but the family did. One was a Hispanic guy named Edgar. He looked to be in his mid-30s or so, and the other was orange-haired woman who gave off strong librarian vibes named Sue. Neither of which knew each other prior to today, but everyone gathered shared one thing in common. They were all faction leaders. Grandpa was obviously the faction leader of the Williams family, Oscar the leader of Little Bite. Haley was technically the official leader, but both her and Renee were leaders of the Jayhawk faction. They apparently went to Kansas. I felt good about guessing something similar. Anyway, Edgar was the leader of the Yellow Beetle faction, something I imagine was derived from his location. Probably a dungeon focused on beetles in some way. Then came Sue, and she was the leader of the Flowing Sword faction. I hadn't really watched her fight, mainly because she didn't seem to need as much help as the others, but she was a sword fighter and apparently a damn good one. It was an interesting group, and after introductions were done, it took about 20 minutes from everyone else talk for me to realize something. All the factions gathered were growing in the same way Grandpa wanted to push our family forward. And while that was believable in its own way, the part I was struggling to grasp for some reason was the fact that the people in those communities were rallying around these new leaders. And in some cases they weren't rallying, they were obeying. Sue, for example, said her and her people doubled as the police in their area, and all the laws of the community were written and enforced by them. I was shocked that they managed to have that level of structure so soon. But while she was the only E grade from her faction, that plenty of peak F grades in seems like, and they all were really good sword fighters. They gave the red people plenty of problems and held supreme control over the area. But she wasn't the most surprising one. That was Mr. Edgar. He actually had a full-scale battle versus another group. That other group wasn't a faction as of yet, but kind of similar to what happened to Renee and Haley. They wanted control of the dungeon that Edgar and the Yellow Beetles held, and a genuine battle happened. Edgar obviously won, but yeah, that shit was crazy to hear. They all turned to Grandpa to hear a similar story, but he didn't have one to give, which caught them all by surprise a bit. Plus, I think our community of Lavia was the smallest among the group here. We were a small population in the first place, and the community got hit pretty hard after the initial attacks. Tens of thousands died, and plenty ran away. Even after we held our ground a couple times, more and more people dipped eventually. If I was being generous, maybe we had just under 1,000 people in total in Lavia. Maybe that will change a bit since things are about to calm down now, but what I know for certain is that the Williams family won't be leaving. no matter what happens. Anyway, the conversation was getting good now. We have furs. A lot of furs, and some of them have special effects without us doing anything at all to it. If everything you said about 100 years of peace is true, then we should have plenty of time to engage in trade, right? Then we'd be more than happy to put furs on the table, for equal value, of course. Grandpa told them about the fact that as long as we passed this phase, then Phase 4 would give us 100 years of safety from the Red people. It was kind of hard to think about a whole century down the road, and just what that meant, but even a couple years of relative safety would have been a blessing. So with that in mind, we couldn't just stay cooped up in our respective communities forever. Well, I guess we technically could, but it would be important that we understood everything that was around us. If all the stuff that was happening to these other factions even had a fraction of a chance to happen to us, then being closed off wouldn't help with that. Then there was rebuilding. We can't live in rubble forever, can we? I've never done construction work beyond putting nails in the wall to hang something, or putting some furniture together, before, but there was always time to learn. Anyway, after Oscar brought his proposal about furs to the table, everyone else took some time to think, and it was Edgar who broke the silence. We could use some of those furs of yours. In exchange, we'd be happy to send plenty beetle carapaces your way. It's strong and can be used to make armor. He paused for a second as he looked down at his mostly destroyed armor, set that he hadn't yet removed, and smiled wryly. Well, good armor for anything we had to fight before this E-grade beetles are a bit harder to work with, for now. The fact he even had an armor set was news enough, one that, if I understood him correctly, was made rather than purchased. Uncle Robert has tried his hand and working with the materials we got from the Snakebite dungeon, but nothing really useful as of yet. I looked over at my own breastplate that was laying not too far from me. It was pretty much scrap now, since burned through all over the place. The fact it lasted so long was a blessing, but it was only ever supposed to be helpful for the F grade. So now, with the fact that I was down a spear, had no reliable armor for my current level, I wouldn't mind getting some beetle armor to hold me over till I could get my own stuff. I'm supposed to be a princeling, so maybe my new guard captain can provide a nice little armor set for me like the ones they were, for example. Grandpa joined in at that point and explained the fact we would have various things related to snakes for trade as well. Not much, but enough to get some things in return. We have weapons. So far, they've performed better than anything we've gotten from both the system and the faction shop. From swords to bows and everything in between, that's what we have to trade. Sue followed up shortly after, and while the words were fresh in the air, Haley spoke up for the Jayhawks. Since everyone's in a sharing mood, we have oars. I think we can get into the details later, but yeah, we have oars. She shot a glance at Renee at that last line, and Renee gave her a nod back, and that was the end of what she had to offer. This conversation was so weird when I thought about the fact that we were having it after driving off our enemies while on an alien planet that we're breathing just fine on now that I think about it. But yeah, if this wasn't a sign of the changing times and how well humans can adapt, then I don't know what would be. 134. Nothing left, B3. The conversation ended about an hour later, and now I was just sitting with my parents. We weren't really talking about anything at the moment, just kind of enjoying the silence. Mom had already spoken to me in detail immediately after the battle, mainly to let me know she was there for me, but she did leave me with a stern-faced reminder. We are not cold-hearted killers. She didn't press nor did she ask questions. She just said that line, gave me a hug, and called it a day. Now here we are sitting on an alien planet waiting to go home. So what do you guys think? I don't think anyone would have minded if we stayed in silence a while longer, but I wanted their opinions. Dad spoke up first. About what? The trade talks the old man had. I nodded at him. Well, I think it's something that would happen eventually. The American government isn't coming back anytime soon, and even if it did try to come back, I don't think people would be too happy about it. Which means we need to handle things ourselves, things like fighting, housing, food, and new resources, getting things from others without violence. These trade agreements, or at least the idea of trade agreements, show that well. I agree, but I don't think we should count out the government just yet, especially not the military. If we could fight back, then so could they. I have a feeling once things finally settle down, they will make a resurgence. I'm surprised none of them showed up at the gate. If and when they do eventually come back, we will need to decide what we want to do. Right now, we essentially lead Laja. Not really like the other factions lead their own areas, but we do. If the self-proclaimed government tries to come expand their leadership to us, what do we do? Mom's words hung in the air as I thought about it. Not just her points either, but Dad's as well. They were both right, I think. I really don't think the American government will come back at all, at least not in the way it was before. It won't be a democracy, there's just no way. It might pretend to be one, but I have a feeling it will be something else entirely, if it happens, of course. But what if they did and then they tried to control us? Not to say we were ever anti-government, but I don't really want anyone else trying to control the family. We were doing just fine by ourselves and handling Laja, but wait a second, Laja is too small. You look constipated, Freddy. What's on your mind, son? Dad was laughing and Mom rolled her eyes at him, and even I chuckled a bit, but he was right. There was a lot on my mind. I think we need to expand. Both of them were immediately thoughtful, but waited for me to continue. Well, if Mom is right, and the government or some other large force pops up and then tries to take us over, then they probably won't back down without a fight if we look weak. If we were a big force by ourselves with not just size but plenty of people, then we would have plenty of soft power. Hopefully enough to make people back off and see us a group to respect and leave alone, rather than weak enough to conquer. You've given this a lot of thought, haven't you? Should I take that as you not wanting to give up the little power we have in Laja now? I scratched my head as I answered. No, I don't think we should. Mom looked at me seriously, and Dad smirked. Our little prince wants to rule it all, I see. We laughed and talked for a little while longer, and eventually other members of the family came to sit with us, and it was honestly just good vibes from there. But it seems that all good things must come to an end eventually. System alert, Phase 3 is now over. System alert, planet Earth has earned the right to prove themselves worthy. System alert, all natives of Earth are to return. System alert, Phase 4 will begin immediately. Well then, we fought a big battle, then spent the next few hours relaxing before finally being allowed to go home. There wasn't much to discuss, so we gathered our things and made our way over to the gate. Just like before, I was suddenly by myself in a bright white space, only this time there was no message waiting for me. 1 second I was on a red alien world, then the next I was back in Nashville with everyone else. Back on planet Vika. The throne room? No, the entire palace of the Vicar had not stopped shaking once the reports of the results at all gates started rolling in with more and more frequency. The people of Vika were losing. On what felt like all fronts, the humans of Earth were not only pushing back his elders and other troops, but they were also decimating them. By the end of it all, 2 gates were actually lost by the humans, but it was too little too late. While the Vicar did not know how long the phase would last, he knew it wasn't going to be a matter of days, and by the time his people took control of 2 gates, all the others were lost and the timer on his life had been reduced to 0. Or at least that's what it felt like when the system announced the reality of the situation, and the knife that was lodged in his chest was finally twisted. Massive lakes of lava raged around the palace, as the anger of the lone degrade of Vika roared his fury, aloud many times over. He of course knew that his death wasn't guaranteed, and he too also had the same 100 years to plan and grow his strength as much as he could to ensure that, when Phase 5 began, he would be ready. But deep down he knew it more than ever now, that he was going to die. It hadn't even been a year yet, and the humans of Earth could already contend with his high elders. Some of them had been in that realm since when he himself was a mere E-grade. They were old veterans of war who should have been able to school children, contending with power they did not understand. Yet they had lost. Those were the thoughts that stayed on a cycle in the mind of the vicar. The proverbial knife in his heart constantly being twisted with every second that passed, and the fact his aged and wise high elders had lost. Each time the cycle closed and restarted, his anger rose a level higher and the palace shook even more than before. All until a single word cut through all of the sound, not just in the palace, but the planet itself. Pathetic. Perhaps if the vicar had kept his mind calm and focused despite his anger, he might have sensed a certain beacon that hadn't stopped being in a distant valley. Perhaps he would have sensed when the space around his world warped and a presence showed up. Perhaps he would have felt it when a will that dwarfed anything that he could ever hope to match settled in his throne room. He did none of that. The word resounded in the throne room, and even more so in the mind of the Vika, like the roars of 1,000 beating drums. He stammered out a response that was practically incoherent, and all the lava moving with vigor around the palace froze in place. It was not the doing of the vicar that caused that. Instead, it was woman with dark blue skin, dressed in the pristine black robes with blue accents who stopped the movement of the lava. It was for no other reason other than she found it annoying. Ignore the babbling vicar. She gazed out into the distance as if waiting for something. And once that was verified, she brought her gaze back to the vicar who had made his way to his knees. Your planet will be spared, but your life is forfeit. The depths await your embrace. The vicar did not get to scream, plead, or have thoughts about what he heard. One second he was there, kneeling with his lowered, and the other, well, there was nothing left of him. And there would never be anything left of him in the face of a B-grade existence. 135. Abrupt changes, B3. After coming through the gate, we spent a couple minutes saying goodbyes and making promises for representatives of each faction to meet right here in Nashville 2 weeks from today. Everyone had a lot to deal with and various things to get in order, figure out exactly what they want to trade and what they would want in return, and I'm sure many other things. But at the same time, we didn't want too much time to go by before another meeting happened. If things took too long to get going, then it would never happen. Plus, there was also the matter of actually transporting the goods, and no one was naive enough to assume that people would just let a transport of valuable resources waltz on by without issue. Now that I think about it, if other communities popped up from here to Nashville, are we going to have to pay taxes if we pass through with goods? That could be annoying if any potential northern neighbors we get are not very understanding or try to force crazy fees on us. The West should be fine. It's pretty much the Everglades and very few pockets of people for miles until we reach Fort Myers and like Tampa. Too far to really pose that much of a problem, I think. East is obviously the ocean, but south. There's a lot going on in the south, and it might be best for us to expand down that way as much as possible. I don't think it counts as conquering, though, if we aren't taking it from anyone. Right. Anyway, it took us another 3 days to get back home, and on the way, we didn't run into any issues. There were more people up and about doing whatever it is they were doing, but we never stayed long enough in any one place to gather details. At a glance, it didn't seem like any one person or group was in charge, but I'm sure that'll change as time passes. Regardless, we were home and nothing was on fire. Nobody died and things seemed to be doing just fine. Of course, that was until Guard Captain Asania called me for me and the leader of the faction, which was Grandpa, into what seems to be an urgent meeting. We saw the urgency in her eyes and tone and quickly went into a room with just the 3 of us. Forgive the abruptness of this meeting, Princeling, but time is of the essence. We have been shrouding this planet, and the one which you just left for some time now, but any longer would have adverse effects. Once the shroud is lifted, this planet will rapidly shift from a preant world to a fully integrated one. These are changes that would have happened over the course of 100 years during Phase 4. All life forms, but sentient and not, and the planet itself would have gone through a myriad of changes, as the full force of the system rooted itself in the laws of your planet. I cannot dive into the details of that for the moment, but what I want you both to understand is that your world is alive, not in the way you and I are, but it is alive nonetheless. During what I believe to be Phase 2, this planet likely went through a very small growth phase as mana was introduced to it. I would imagine you all likely experienced a few rough moments as the size of the planet expanded quickly. The planet may or not grow slightly once more, but the previous injection of mana was mainly directed to the size of the planet and incorporating mana into its natural elements, which likely changed the fundamental rules of your planet. This time, it will mainly go to the things that live on this planet. Humans born after today will be more attuned to mana. Forests will grow denser, trees far taller, oceans way deeper. But most of all, the animals will undergo rapid evolution. An evolutionary process that would have taken 100 years to complete will happen in a matter of hours to days. Some animals may not change at all, while others will become things that have likely never been seen before on this planet. The danger will immediately shift from your subjugators to the natives of your planet, humans and animals alike. Her gaze then shifted to Grandpa. You are a faction head. In the eyes of the system, you are no different from a ruler. Factions and how they work will immediately change once the shroud has been lifted. Any claimed territory you have will be sealed in the eyes of the system as yours, and anyone who lives or steps foot in that territory will know who owns it. I highly recommend spreading your territory as far and as wide as possible the faster you can. It is not easy to claim something the system has given to someone else, not without spilling rivers of blood. There will be far more things that change with factions and many more things that change entirely. This is only a warning to be prepared for what it is to come. After a few seconds of silence, as her words settled within our minds, Grandpa patted me in on the shoulder once before standing up to leave. I'm sure you two have some princely things to discuss. I'll go get the family prepared for some liveliness. I didn't get up to follow Grandpa because he was right. I don't know if my guard captain had anything for me, but I had a few different things to say to her. Before I could say anything, though, she held up a hand. The shroud is about to be lifted. I suggest holding off any further discussion till things settle down. Only a few moments later, and something changed. I couldn't quite put my finger on exactly what changed, but I could feel something in the air. I don't know exactly, but something definitely shifted, and then the system reacted. System alert, phase faux error. System alert. System alert. Planet Vika has given up its rights to subjugate at the death of its progenitor. The planet Earth and its surrounding world will now be fully integrated into the system. Alert, rapid evolution will occur. Alert, new dungeons will form and all system shop nodes will cease to exist. Alert, professions are now available for the sentience of Earth. Alert, Earth is now accessible to the multiverse. Alert, integration will begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 commencing. The system rattled off a few different alerts without a break very quickly, just like the first day the system descended on us. Then, something grabbed the world. Just like earlier, I don't know why it felt like that, but that's how it felt, like something had gripped the planet itself and was dragging something. I leaped to my feet and ran outside. Up above, the chains that showed up all those months ago in our skies were literally being dragged away. A few seconds later, they were gone. Then the ground beneath my feet started to shake. Again, much like it did months ago. The water from the river that ran through the compound was violently splashing around. The trees all around the compound were shaking as well. Everything was moving in some way, shape, or form. Before long, everyone in the house had gathered outside, and I'm sure all of us were slack-jawed as we watched things just grow. The trees got bigger, wider, the grass, bushes, the ground cracked all over as things grew like crazy. We were literally watching in real time as the small forest-like areas on our compound overtook everything else. But that wasn't the worst part. Soon sounds started coming from all over the place. Birds chirping, things roaring, and a multitude of other sounds I couldn't identify properly. Then came barking, the family dogs. I should have realizing something was up when they didn't come running out with us. But we all sprinted back inside only to find them sprawled on the floor in various places, writhing in what looks to be severe pain. Shit. 136. Education, B3. The outside had calmed down as well. There were still random roars about the place, but we could go investigate that later. In the meantime, we were all currently sitting in the family room as we observed the dogs. It was about an hour later and they were up and about now, bouncing around and trying to play. Of course they were gathered mainly around Grandpa. They were his dogs after all. Everything would be good and normal if not for the fact they were now bigger, like much bigger. If they were about 2, maybe 2.5 feet in height, they were at least a foot taller now, and that came with the added mass to match their new height. They were still acting and behaving like they were before, just bigger. Maybe if Ascendant wasn't here for me to question, then I would have just believed that was the only change, but there was something far more important that changed within them. They had cores now. Apparently, cores were what separated normal animals and even insects from beasts. Normal animals would live and die as they were, but beasts were different. They had the ability to evolve into something more just like we could. There was a lot more involved since cores actually held a lot of value, but Ascendant made it clear that if I wanted more information, I should go read a book on it. Then before I could ask exactly where I could get a book on cores, she mentioned checking the faction shop. I took one glance in there and closed right back. There were far too many changes to go through all at once, and we now have access to way more things than before. I would need a few hours to go through it, but now wasn't the time. Instead, I had another talk with Ascendant to handle instead. A few moments later, I left the family and our new big dogs to do whatever it is they were doing and went to a room where Ascendant and my other guards were waiting for me. They were still silent as ever, but at least we exchanged nods. Ascendant, though, had plenty to say as always. Princeling, there is much to discuss, but first please check your status and confirm the grade of this planet. Curious, I did as she asked, and to my surprise that grade had changed. This entire time it was D grade, but now it was clearly C grade. Interesting. It's C grade now. Then my time as your guard captain will end in the next few months. As soon as they are able, a different team will arrive to handle your protection. Why can't whoever they are come now? You guys made it here right. It is not so simple. My team and I are only in the E grade, same as you. The amount of people concerned with what I do or where I go are too little to matter. Above E grade, though, that visibility changes significantly. Someone in the D grade is a walking natural disaster, while someone a single grade above that puts entire countries at risk. That kind of force cannot move easily. That, of course, takes into account that we recently mobilized a B-grade level existence. That would take a lot of attention, and we will need to move carefully from this point on. We cannot keep you hidden forever. At some point you will be found, but we will delay it for as long as possible. Sigh. I had enemies I've never seen or heard of, and a promise that those enemies will soon find me. That doesn't really fill me with the warm and fuzzies. So what now? Now we will begin your training and education. I've already reviewed your footage from beyond the gate. Now, when did she have time to do that? Well, you fight like a brute, but I suppose that is to be expected from someone only recently introduced to the system and mana. While that is passable for the standards of most places, it is far below what is expected of a princeling. I almost instinctively wanted to defend myself, but what could I have said that she didn't summarize with one line already? I was new to fighting, new to the system, new to mana. It still hadn't even been a year since it all began, and now I was being compared to whatever standards a princeling had. Of course, I had no idea what those standards were, but there was no way I would be able to match that. Not under a year, at least, where I barely knew anything about anything of importance. We were about to continue the conversation when she looked to the door, and just a second later Raycon burst into the room without knocking. Freddy, shit kinda hit the fat out here. A bunch of snakes from the dungeon escaped somehow and are, well, attacking people and destroying shit. We're gonna go help. Probably don't need you right now, but if it gets worse, someone will come calling. Oh, and Grandpa is gonna go full, your lordship, mode once he wraps this up, so be prepared for that. He nodded at Asania, then left just as fast as he came in, though he managed to not slam the door in the process. Mom must be close by. Now I probably would have rushed out of the house to go help, but he didn't look or sound worried, especially since he had time to drop the lordship joke in. It was from one of Grandpa's first ever books where he basically spammed that form of address the whole book, and it became something like a joke. But what Raycon meant by it was that Grandpa was going to take control of Laja, and not through a soft understanding that we were in charge, but he was going to make it clear that it was so. I kinda knew that was coming based on what Asania said to him, but, well, it's fine. It's a good thing, and I'm sure these escaping snakes will help to reinforce how strong our family is. Speaking of escaping snakes, though, snakes escaping from a dungeon, how does that happen? It's called a dungeon break. It usually happens when a dungeon has been left uncleared for too long. The mana within builds up till it reaches a point where it can no longer be contained, and this is the result. This time, though, the planet just had a massive surge of mana. I wouldn't be surprised if every dungeon on the surface of the planet was going through a dungeon break right now. That was far more worrying. My mind immediately shifted to the Gauntlet dungeon, because if some of the things on the later floors were to escape, people could die very quickly before it is handled. Though it appears my worries were painted on my face. The dungeon I first met you in is likely not going to be a problem. That church would never allow one of their own dungeons to experience a dungeon break. But that is enough of that. Your training begins now. First things first is a lesson. What mana is and how it, you and the system all form a connection. Now I could give you the answer, but I'd like to hear your thoughts first. You know, when she made training and re-education, for some reason, my mind didn't translate that education part to actual lessons. I think I kinda want to go hunt snakes. 137. Bonding over snakes B3 POV Raycon. Well, isn't this some bullshit? Snakes from the first 3 floors of the dungeon are just out and about wreaking havoc, and they won't stop coming. The water ones aren't so bad because there isn't any water in the immediate area of the dungeon, but those stone bastards are gonna be annoying. I say that only to see Uncle Robert crush one like he was hitting a cabinet of fine china with a sledgehammer, all with one swing of his greatsword. Must be oh so nice to be E-grade, but new Raycon, you're too young, protect your future, blah blah blah. Everyone else gets to move on to the next grade, but here I am, still stuck as an F grade. How many of these damn snakes am I going to have to kill just to integrate one trait? I haven't been sitting on my ass while everyone was gone either. I dove into the dungeon twice a day and trained like a man mad in the yard for hours on end. I even caught that weird blue lady sent to watch Freddy staring at me one time, and I thought for sure she was going to give me some pointers, but nothing. It's not like I have any dreams of being the strongest or anything like that. Shit like that is much more up Freddy's alley, and I'm glad to leave him to it. But damn it, I don't like being the weak one. Not when people are fucking dying, and my mother hasn't acted like my mother since Dad died, and my little brother won't talk, and... I think you got it already, Raycon. I looked up from the snake I held in my left hand, while I continuously drove my dagger through its skull. Then I looked over at Uncle Robert. Yeah, I think I did get it, just making sure you know. I moved to walk away towards the next target, but Uncle Robert placed an iron grip on my shoulder. In that same moment, one of the snakes from floor 2 rushed towards, and Uncle Robert barely gave it a glance before it was split in 2. He was the biggest out of all of his siblings, but I swear the man looked even bigger right about now. I'm good, Uncle, just had a lot on my mind, that's all. He shook his head at me. You're not good, and that's all right. Hell, none of us out here are good right now. but keeping things bottled in doesn't help much. He then gestured to all the snakes that still remained, which genuinely was that much anymore since Grandpa and the others were going to work, but they hadn't stopped coming out of the dungeon either. Let it out, Raycon, scream if you have to. It ain't gonna solve the problem, but damn it, it helps. Honestly, I love my family to the moon and back, and every single one of them constantly made sure that both I and my little brother were all right, and that my mom remembered to eat, but I didn't want any more pitying. I was tired of it. I've shed my tears already and accepted that Dad wasn't coming back. But if Uncle Robert was telling me to just let loose, then that was something I could get behind. Phantom Shroud. The area around the dungeon entrance was immediately covered in shadows. I was getting better and better at controlling the shadows themselves as I trained with it. I realized a while ago that skills were somewhat like templates of abilities. They were like pre-made versions of something I could already do and made the exact mana movement to accomplish it easy. I didn't have to actively think about how to control my mana to achieve the desired effect. Just call the skill, and it would work. But at the end of the day, it was my mana, and I could tell it to do what I wanted it to. At base level, this skill made it so that no one else could see or hear anything within the shadows. But it didn't actually blind or deafen anyone, just made it hard to see through and hear any noise I made. I don't know how to get around that yet, but what I've been working to improve is lessening the drain on my mana pool, and most importantly, using the shadows to kill. The shadows are corporeal and have physical form, so why can't I use them to kill people? Or in this case, snakes. There were 10 different snakes in the shroud right at this moment, and as I drove my dagger into the eye slit of the one closest to me, I felt 2 others convulsing before dying as shadows flooded into their bodies like water in a sinking ship, and squeezed anything that was worth squeezing. In a perfect world, anything and everything that was deemed an enemy should be automatically attacked by shadows whilst in the shroud, but 2 were my limit for the moment, and only if they were below a certain level. Anything too strong would require way too much mana, but I wasn't complaining at all. This was progress. I then spent the next few minutes cleaning up the remaining snakes before a voice cut through the shadows. Hey, turn the lights back on, nephew. No one else can see, damn it. Uncle Mac's voice came booming through the shadows, and I winced and dismissed the skill. I won't admit to him, but I did kind of forget other people were here for a second. It's Uncle Robert's fault. Yeah, definitely his fault. Ah, the sun is back. Thank you, nephew, I appreciate all you for us. I just stared at him, and he moved on without batting an eye. Pops, we probably gotta handle the dungeon itself to stop them from coming out. A couple of are gonna go in, why not stay out here and do your thing? Practically all of Ladger is outside at the moment. Grandpa, who wasn't too far away and had more than a few snakes dead all around him, just waved his stub in the air. Uncle Mac took that as acknowledgement enough. Then he, Uncle Lenny, Aunt Risha, Aunt Kimberly, and Aunt Abigail all went inside the dungeon together. Now I was almost certain that he could have handled it himself, but they were being cautious, and rightfully so. Who knew what this meant about what was in the dungeon? But it must have been the right choice in the end, since even after a few seconds passed, nothing else came out. Now the only people out here were myself, Uncle Robert, Aunt Jennifer, Uncle Darryl, Grandpa, and the dogs who were eating the snakes. Wonder that will do to em. Hey, let's go clean up all the snakes, and as you do so, tell anyone you see to gather at the compound. There's gonna be some announcements. Uncle Robert and Uncle Darryl looked like they weren't even listening to their own dad, and Aunt Jennifer gave him a respectful nod before scampering off with her bow. To think I would one day see Freddie's mom running across the town with a bow, an arrow in her hand, shooting at snakes. She never even liked to do paintball. Anyway, let's go invite a whole bunch of people over to dinner then, shall we? Maybe Mom will be up for some cooking. That used to always get her out of a funk. 138. A Real Lesson B3 POV Fred. I thought about the question quite a bit. For the most part, I've been thinking about it in general since day one. Every new skill or trait, the changing of classes, the way my mana felt outside of skill use, and all the increase in control I gained since reaching E grade. I've given it a whole lot of thought, and the biggest I realized is that anything done using mana without a skill was much harder than just thinking about a skill and using it. It was like skills took the thinking out of the equation. But I've never felt like I couldn't do the same thing myself. It was just harder. Then there was the actual using of skills. Things weren't so black and white there, and while the skill had a default use, there was room for me to make it do other things. At the end of the day, it was my mana, and I was the one in control. A good example was the Abyss, verdict I used in the battle. At a glance, it seems like someone I could use on one target at a time. But what was stopping me from using it on multiple opponents? The answer was nothing. So I tried to do exactly that, and it worked. Anyway, I explained all of that to my guard captain. Questioning how things work is always the best path forward. Anyone who accepts the first easy explanation given to them will never make it far, at least not as far as you will need to go. Now, regarding your answer, you are on the right path. The screen you see is a base-level understanding of who and what you are. It is not something that should be considered to be a reflection of exactly what you're capable of. That, of course, includes traits, skills, and classes. Everything that the system gives you is something that is accomplishable without it. As always, it was one thing to think you know or understood something. It was another to actually receive some ironclad facts that backed up whatever thoughts you had. Especially when it was about concepts that you've never really heard of beyond fantasy. Anyway, I made it clear I understood and was paying attention, but I did have one question. I understand skills, but how would someone be able to formulate their own class or even trait? She answered without missing a beat, almost like she was expecting that question and was prepared for it. And maybe she was. I can see that being a common question after hearing the explanation she just gave. To answer that, you would first need to understand what a class or a trait was. Let's begin with the easiest one first. A trait should be simple enough to understand. It is a modification of the body in some way, shape, or form. It can show up in many different facets, but it is always and will always be a modification of the body. That modification can show up as an addition, a subtraction of some kind, or a change in something that exists. The system can handle these modifications on your behalf, whether you earned the trait through climbing the ranks or from something else. But in the same way you grew limbs, fingernails for your fingers, skin to cover your bones, blood vessels to your organs, then it is the same way you can grow new traits. That made sense, but it also didn't make sense at the same time. I didn't actively choose to grow my own skin or my fingernails or anything at all. If I could change things about my body, I would have grown a little taller like Uncle Robert. You are probably thinking that you didn't actively do any of that, and it is true. Very few people actively participated in their own natural growth in such a direct fashion. What's important to understand is that your body can change. If you were to shave your head, would your hair not grow back? If you were to cut your skin, would it not heal? If you were to starve yourself, would you not grow frail and skinny? Even now, your body has a natural system of its own without you forcing it to do any of these things. Yes, your actions might have caused them, but you did not consciously tell your body to heal a cut on your arm. It is the same logic behind traits. You want better eyesight, so you simply make changes to your eyes. You want stronger skin, so you make a change to your current one. This action is obviously not easy. In fact, you could spend years trying to force a singular change that could even end up being worse than what you had. But with the use of mana and an intricate understand of your body and the change you would like to make, it is possible to create your own traits. That was the easy one. If that was supposed to be considered easy, then what the hell was hard? She was talking about literally replacing my eyes all by myself, and if I fucked up, I could come out on the other end blind as a bat. Why the hell would I even attempt to do that? Okay, fine, I can think of some use cases even now in my limited understanding of the world, but it still seems far too risky to even consider. We'll leave traits there for now. Classes, on the other hand, are a bit different. What exactly is a class? The answer to that has been debated long before there was life on this planet, and it will continue to be debated for even longer. But despite the long discussion surrounding that topic, there is something of a general understanding that majority of scholarly communities accept. A class is nothing more than a path. What makes it different from a conceptual path is the fact that this path is physical. You are literally aligning everything that you are in its entirety to this path. Your very cells will change to fit the current path that you were traversing down, and the system helps greatly with that process. Providing skills to fit your chosen path, giving passives to support and reflect your path, and so on and so forth. Even the name of the class you see is nothing but the system's understanding of your chosen path reflected back to you. It is not a lock on your capabilities, but instead a lock on the type of help the system will provide towards your path. For example, if you were a hunter who used a bow and arrow as your primary weapons, the system will be unlikely to provide you a skill that spews flames from your mouth. Perhaps it would have given you something that allows you to apply fire to your arrows as they sail through the sky instead. You would have heard about Heartborn classes, yes. They should have been available in your first selection. Yeah, I have. That's how I was able to do anything related to water so early. That is the system analyzing you and displaying a list of what it believes to be your best paths forward. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying I could have technically forged my own class right then, and there instead of picking the options the system displayed for me. Technically, though it is highly recommended to always go with the system's recommendations since most cannot compete with the analytical power of the system, at least through the early grades, and also the fact that while it is technically possible, it is functionally impossible at the same time. The understanding required to forge a path worthy enough to be acknowledged by the system is not graspable in the F grade. Your mind simply isn't advanced enough. And let's say, for some reason, your mind was advanced enough to do that, then it is likely that whatever path you could have or would have created, the system would have long since thought about it and displayed it before you. So there's no purpose in being able to do that at all then. Why even bother if the system will handle it for me anyway? This only applies to the early grades, primarily F through D for those grades. The path that you are walking is often so broad that every branching path of said path has already been explored by many before you. But the higher one climbs, the less traveled a path, and the more it becomes something that you and you alone can call your own. You will learn more about this in the future, and I am not in any place to be teaching you in-depth information about the higher grades. Though it appears we are out of time, we will continue this lesson later. Not long after she said that there was a knock at the door, and this time it was my dad who walked in. Unlike Raycon, he at least waited for me to say, "Come in." Sorry to interrupt, son, but you're probably not going to want to miss what's about to happen. The old man is about to give a speech to all of Laja. Honestly, the conversation was going better than I thought, but a damn State of the Union address to all of Laja sounded important enough. 139. Grandpa's stance, B3, so I knew Dad said all of Laja. But I didn't know he literally meant all of Laja. I could hear the muttering loud and clear long before we exited the house, but upon exiting the noise levels increased greatly, and it was no surprise why. They were hundreds of people out here, and that was just in the immediate surroundings. The list of people outside the compound itself was not a small amount. This was easily a few thousand people, and that was with the overgrown trees and bushes being taken into account too. It was like we were standing on a movie set or something. Either way, that was a much bigger number than I thought in Laja. I was operating with the understanding that there were only a few hundred people here. Where did all of these people come from? Broward. Plus, it wasn't like it was daytime. The sky was dark and the moon hung high. The only lights in the area came from various lit tiki-style torches all over the compound. Then there was Grandpa standing in the bed of an old truck. It damn sure didn't drive anymore, so they must have literally dragged it there. I didn't even peep when it got so late, nor did I hear any of this happening. How did I miss all of this? Was the lesson that good? I snuck a glance over to my trio of guards who followed us outside and stood close by. Anyway, a good amount of the family was standing next to Grandpa, but Dad and I just hung by the house. Grandpa was apparently waiting for us and gave us a nod which we returned before he turned to address the crowd. His voice boomed like he was holding a megaphone. Holy shit, since when could he do that? Good evening to all of you. If you don't know who I am by now, then my name is Lance Williams and the patriarch of the Williams family. In addition to that, I am also the head of the Williams family faction. I know all of you have received notifications stating that you are in the territory of the Williams family faction. If you are confused by that, then I hope this provides some explanation. For the foreseeable future, Ladja will be under the control and the protection of the Williams family. Plenty of murmurs rose up at that statement, but Grandpa didn't even acknowledge it and just continued talking, his own voice booming over everyone else. I will say that one more time. Ladja is under the control and protection of the Williams family. The government isn't coming back. The mayor isn't coming back. America as we knew it is not coming back. As we step into this new reality of Earth, the Williams family will ensure that Ladja and its people do not suffer. Who the hell agreed to make you king instead? Someone in the crowd managed to raise their voice enough to be heard over all the chatter. I thought Grandpa would ignore it as well, but he turned towards where the voice came from. Who agreed to make me king? I am no king, but the Williams family rules Ladja, and that is final. Who agreed to give us the power? We did. Our blood, our sweat, our lives. We have protected our home since the aliens attacked us, and we will continue to do so. Any who have a problem with it, step forward. We will address it here and now, for all to see. Grandpa's voice was laced with steel, and his eyes looked like the eyes of a lion stalking prey as he looked from the source of the voice and swept his gaze across the crowd. He waited a few seconds, then he shouted, I said to come. If you have the balls to speak out against MY family, then come forth. No one moved except for the people who were slowly distancing themselves from the man who yelled out. Even he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. I thought for certain that someone would do something, but there was nothing but silence. The murmurs didn't come back after that. Then consider that matter settled. Now there will be plenty of changes in Ladja. I won't allow my home to turn into a chaotic hell, nor will I allow the people who I am promising to protect to have no room to better their lives. All of you saw the same messages I did about professions, and the fact that the system shop in the park up the street got removed. If you haven't already checked for yourself, then trust me when I tell you it is no longer there. That system shop is how everyone here fed and clothed themselves, and losing it would have been a dire situation without alternatives. My family has those alternatives, and we are willing to share them with Ladja. In fact, we have been sharing them already to quite a few of you. We have also given a small group of you jobs and paid salaries for them. Not everyone wants to go in the dungeon and put your lives at risk just to buy food. There are plenty of jobs available and will provide fair pay for each of them, along with official professions. We will need merchants, builders, and all the roles needed in construction, messengers, scouts, cooks, official warriors that will fight in our name, and anything else needed to run a city and have a free-flowing economy. Of course, this means tax will be collected at some point, but not for a few weeks to month to allow all of you to get on your feet. These changes will also include dungeon access. Too many people are going in and never coming out, so that will be controlled. We won't restrict access, but control it. You can still enter if you so wish, but a process will be in place. All of the details can be worked out later and on an individual basis, but this is the future and how things will go from now on. Trust my family and allow us to keep you safe and make Ladja a safer place. Together. Well shit, what a speech. He didn't linger and immediately hopped off the truck, and Uncle Robert took his place, and he promptly started issuing instructions. We are looking for people who want to be a part of a military force sworn to the Williams family and Ladja. We will help with equipment, training, and resources for growth. If you are interested, come find me over there. Then Uncle Mac hopped up next. We are looking for builders and people who want to work construction. Laja needs to be rebuilt sooner rather than later. If you're interested, I'll be over there. Then Aunt Kimberly took the stage asking for people who wanted to work as healers. And finally, Aunt Abigail asked for people who wanted to work admin roles. I watched as people moved towards the things they were interested in, and others who simply left. But I was just standing here confused as ever. When in the fuck did they plan all of this, and where the hell are they getting the money to support so many people? And providing official professions? When and how are we doing that? The old man has been busy. Isn't this way too much in such little time, though? Maybe, but after he spoke to your friend over there when we first got back, he laid out his plan to the rest of us. Then after everything happened, the faction got a few updates, and the store changed significantly. He spent all his time in there, then fought snakes, then came back and analyzed the shop once again. Once he was done, he made a few changes to his plan, and this is the result. There's no way he planned all of this in less than a day. Probably not. I'm sure this was in the works back on that alien planet after the big faction discussion, and he refined it more and more in the days it took for us to get back, and then boom, here we are. The old man was always good when it came to things like this. You think building the legacy he built form, nothing was easy as just writing a couple books. I'm just glad that the people are accepting it for the most part. I was worried he was going to spear someone through the chest if they actually did step forward. Yeah, makes sense, and Grandpa probably wouldn't have done that probably. 140. I get it. B3, honestly and somewhat sadly as well, there was nothing for me to do. Yeah, I could go help with whatever was going on in some way, shape, or form, but no one really wanted my assistance. It was like I was being told to go sit my ass down somewhere. Wait, no, Uncle Mac did say something like that. But anyway, I got the idea, so I didn't push back too much and just went back to my lessons. It's been a long-ass day already, but being in the E grade did a lot for my stamina, plus my guard captain was all too happy to continue. We got off topic slightly, so let's refocus. You, the system, and mana. The system is a reflection of what you are now, the path in which you tread, and a helping hand in some cases to traverse that path. Mana, on the other hand, is what links it all together. It is what you use to do everything that you wish to do. With mana, the possibilities are endless, and it is up to you just how far it takes you. Now, if you want to get into the specifics of mana and what it is, then I suggest that is research to do on your own time. For now, let us transition to you personally. As I've stated before, you fight like a brute. The opponents you fought were not great warriors in any sense of the word. Even the lone, elder-like figure who met you in the battle initially isn't worth much. By all definition, this is a weak race of people, and their combat capabilities plus a lack of any meaningful technologically advanced weapons showcased that, and then some. There is no faction that still uses such rudimentary weaponry that is worth paying attention to. Wait. Are you talking about the weapons themselves or what they were made out of? Good question, the answer could easily both, but in this let's focus on what they were made out of. There is nothing wrong with using swords, spears, or anything of the sort, but even among weapons for those in the F grade, the quality is not worth a conversation. And just to clarify, some of the strongest beings that I am aware of personally make use of the weapons I just brought up, but most factions aren't limited to just those weapons. Remember, mana can do a lot of things, and that includes weapon production. Does that answer your question? Yes, thank you. It did more than just answer my question, though. Do guns exist out there? Like mana-empowered ones. I half expected that everyone would be using some variation of ancient weaponry, but it appears that isn't the case. That actually makes a lot of sense. Back to the point. These were not opponents that you should have faced injury against. If your mana control was as refined as it could have been, then this battle would have been easier in many ways. Next are your skills themselves. They have good uses, but were not used in an efficient manner, though the skill in which the visage of a Leviathan is displayed upon activation. I highly recommend never to use that skill near anyone who serves the goddess of water. Are you going to explain why? Well, she herself is a Leviathan, a race that all those who dwell in the ocean revere, but none more so than the goddess herself. They are seen as a race of esteemed royalty among those like myself. In fact, if you weren't a princeling, meaning you were chosen by my god, you would have already been attacked. Even your grandfather. When he first appeared in the dungeon, I could smell something akin to a Leviathan on him. I know about the church and their dungeons. I doubt they placed a noble Leviathan on their floors, but perhaps a variant. That alone could have gotten him killed. So again, do not show that skill to anyone who serves the goddess of water, at least not before C grade. Well, I nodded, but I was taking that advice with a grain of salt. If I needed to use oceans, more to save my life or of someone I care about, or to do something I wanted to do, then I would do exactly that. Anyway, the conversation didn't go on for much longer after that. I kinda didn't feel like sitting there anymore after this lady said she would have attacked me or Grandpa could have gotten killed if I wasn't a princeling. If anything, it was just another reminder that these people are not my friends. They have their own agendas, and I just stumbled into their realties on the whim of someone else. Though maybe that was some dirt on the church that I could use if it came to it. They really did have a newborn Leviathan in there. Now, since no one still wanted me to help, I freshened up, then finally took some time to review the faction shop and everything that changed there. It was a lot. In fact, the change began with all of the categories we first saw upon entering the shop. Instead, there are only 3 options now. Search, auction, sell. The search option didn't give any input or explanation as to what it was, but then when I imagined searching for a spear, a massive list of spears expanded before me, and no matter how much I scrolled, the list went on and on. It was mind-boggling, like truly shocking to stare at so many options that it was doing far more harm than good, especially when a lot of the numbers I saw exceeded anything I had. Still, I continued searching for different things, from other weapons, armor, guns, bullets, storage, and a bunch of other random things that flashed across my mind. It was all there. One of the more interesting things I searched for, though, was professions, and while I didn't buy anything, I got plenty of information, likely the same Grandpa got. There were scrolls of some kind that straight granted professions. The professions themselves were graded, and anything rated an F-grade profession was cheap. Only 5 form what I see. Of course, that was still 50 gold coins if I remember correctly, but something like a runesmith was a E-grade profession, and that was 1,000 system credits by itself. All in all, having access to the things we needed didn't seem like it would be a problem, but the gold to credit conversion tool was gone. Ignoring that for now, I moved to the auction tab, and it was pretty simple to understand. There was an option to list goods and to browse auctions, but only on a local level. No idea what they considered local, and there wasn't a single thing listed at the moment, so I'm guessing at minimum local meant Earth only. But more than likely it was a distance thing as well. Sure, I'll find out later. Leaving that alone came the sell tab. Straightforward enough, I think. We could sell items. There wasn't any big explanation around it, just a slot to place my item then. Well, then I'd assume I'd be given money, but so far I've thought to sell my clothes and none of it has worked. Is it too worthless, I wonder? Not giving up, I wandered around the house picking up anything I could get my hands on before trying to sell it, and nothing clicked until I see. I found a box filled to the brim with scales. I think these were the scales from the snakes on the 3rd floor, and just one of them returned a whopping .08 credits. But there were easily hundreds of them in this box. Even 100 of them alone would give me 8 credits. That might not seem like a lot, but we never actually tried harvesting any of the snakes. Just killed the ones that got in the way and moved on. What if we harvested a floor properly? Oh, then there was the E-grade section. How much would one of their scales be worth? Oh, and cores. Wouldn't cores be worth a lot too? Especially now that we know to look for them. I get it, Grandpa, I get it. 141. Learning, B3. The compound did not slow down at all for over a week. After Grandpa's big speech, the number of people going and coming was measured in the hundreds. Although a good number of folks did not want to come work for the family, we still ended up with around 200 new hires essentially. This was good though because we didn't want to hire the whole of Laja. For one, we couldn't afford it, and two, that wouldn't make sense. Grandpa wanted to create a real economy here, and if everyone was on payroll then, that was one large point of failure. People needed to come up with their businesses and add their own income into the cycle. So while we hired around 200 people, I think Grandpa sponsored a few others to create their own business too. I didn't know all of them, but I did know there was a butcher involved. Which was important because a couple of days after that speech, some folks got attacked by a group of flying squirrels, and someone needed to handle their bodies. I didn't even know we had flying squirrels in Florida, but that wasn't the problem. It was the fact they were the size of large cats that made it a problem. Squirrels the size of cats who could also fly and were clearly predators now because they attacked people instead of scurrying away like usual. Thankfully, no one died since Raycon happened to be nearby and he took care of them, but it was a sign of things to come. To the west of Laja was already full of nature and animals before all of this even happened, but it was always far and away. Now, there was a massive forest just next door, and that wasn't taking into account all the parks that were now overrun with trees. So we were expecting more wandering attacks, but thankfully we didn't hire 200 people for no reason. About half of them would be a part of the construction team, and it wasn't like we had to buy profession books for all of them. Once someone reads the book in full, the system would prompt them with an offer to accept the profession, and then the book could be used by someone else. Plus, none of them were big books in the slightest. You could finish reading them in about 30 minutes. Though that wasn't the best feature, instead it was the fact that after reading a book and accepting a profession, it came with some base level of knowledge, and people could get to work right away. They even got levels for doing things in line with their professions. Levels separate from their class level, which was an interesting dynamic worth exploring later. The construction team would be responsible for clearing some of these trees, all of the rubble, and rebuilding Laja to fit our new reality, which meant walls of some kind. If we could be victim to attacks from beasts, then walls made sense. After all of our technological advancements, as a planet, we were going back to building castles. But that wouldn't be something immediate, and still left the people here vulnerable to attacks. Instead, the Laja militia would handle that stuff. Out of the remaining 100 people or so we brought on, 50 of them made it in the Laja militia. They had a lot more than 50 applicants, but we weren't going to accept all of them, and a few requirements were in place as well. Plus, I heard quite a bit of people dropped out once they were presented with terms backed by the system. It wasn't one of the things I looked up in the shop, but apparently there were contracts to be purchased, and the terms within those contracts would be held up by the system. Not everyone wanted to be tied down like that, while others jumped at it because it meant we had to hold up our promises as well. But it would be their responsibility to protect Laja. Well, it would still be some time before they were ready for that, since gear was needed, standard training and organizational hierarchy put in place, and a few other stuff. So in the meantime, it was really just Raycon and Uncle Lenny on guard duty. Needless to say, people were beyond busy, and Grandpa and the others practically lived in the snakebite dungeon to make sure we didn't go broke. Meanwhile, I've been in lesson after lesson this whole time. From talking about mana, to understanding the power gap between grades, which was enormous, to how our actions influence the type of classes we have available when evolving to the next grade, the differences between some races and others, and every topic came with a long discussion. All of it was pretty important, and I shared everything I learned with my family, of course. But one of the more interesting tidbits of information was about progressing through the E grade. It was apparently the easiest grade to advance within by a massive margin. When she explained it, I couldn't help but agree. So as an F grade, I was doing the whole leveling thing for the first time, and my body was getting traits, new skills, a gene eventually, All of it was for the first time. In the E grade, I was just building on a foundation that I created in the F grade. If the F grade was like building a vessel, then the E grade was actually filling that vessel up. As long as someone wanted to progress through E grade and was willing to do the work, then they wouldn't face any problems. The problem began when trying to reach the D grade, and this kinda blew my mind. For a lot of races out there, reaching D grade went against their natural functions. E grade was a qualitative leap from the F grade, but D grade was like being reborn into something that the system, mana, the world itself, liked a bit more. That was the word she used, liked. What did it mean to be liked by the system? The answer wasn't official or anything, but like many other things, when it came to the system, it was the general understanding. The system pushed for death. Whenever I killed a beast or man, I gained something in return. The system was rewarding the act of killing, and those who could kill better was in turn favored more by the system, thus getting blessed with rarer skills, classes, traits, all of it. It was eye-opening in a way, to think of the system as something pushing killing forward, and then rewarding the ones who were essentially the best murderers with better items. Either way, the fact remains. Getting through E will be a breeze, but most never make it to D simply because going further than E was going against the natural order of things. There was more to it than that, but Ascendant said I'll learn when the time comes. As annoying as that was, I didn't let it bother me too much when there was already so much new information. I was getting not just from Ascendant, but from everything else happening as well. Laja was slowly coming back together, and I was witnessing the results live. It was amazing to see, and I had no plans of learning everything there was to learn in just 1 week. I had many questions to ask now and even more that I hadn't even thought of yet to consider. Things will come in due time, no need to overly stress myself out now. Especially not when my physical training was finally about to start, which of course was taking place in the ocean. Where else would a princeling of some water god learn how to fight? 142. Beach Talk B3. Another week passed, and as has been common these last few days, I've found myself sitting on the beach staring out into the ocean. It was the middle of the day, and I've just finished my morning circuit of exercises. Ascendant, or the devil she's turned out to be, wakes me up before the sun rises every day, and makes sure by the time I was done with my morning exercises, I wouldn't be able to feel my legs, which was extremely hard to do considering the fact that water kept me revitalized. Which is why she did something to minimize the effect the water would have on me. I still don't know what she did, and I've been trying to figure it out, but no luck. In the meantime, I've been swimming out to the deep ocean every damn morning and being forced to fight against her, and even the sharks out there. Because of course the ocean is infested with massive sharks now. I figured it was probably a dungeon break of that very first dungeon me and Grandpa cleared, since I doubt anyone was around to clear it. So there was that. Plus that was still just my morning exercise. The stuff she makes me do in the afternoon is borderline life-threatening. She was currently somewhere out there doing who knows what, and the other two, who were still forever silent, weren't sitting too far from me. Far enough that they won't bother me, but close enough to react if something came up. There was only person who's been consistently approaching me the last couple of days during my midday break. Well, did you win today? I looked over at Iris, who was seated beside me, and sighed. No, wasn't even close. Is she still doing that thing with the water? Yep, I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's kinda hard to focus when I'm trying to breath, swim, and fight at the same time. And she doesn't say shit the whole time. Just beats my ass while I flail around in the water like an idiot. Meanwhile, she's moving in the water like a damn dolphin. You know what I'm gonna say, right? Yes, yes, if she could swim like a dolphin, then I can too. And I know that, I definitely do try. I'm pretty sure my afternoon session is supposed to help me with that, but it isn't easy. That's why it's called Training Freddy. I'm sure in a few months you'll also look like a dolphin out there. She was right, and I knew it, but it didn't change the fact I've been getting my ass whooped every day, and it felt like I was slamming my head against a wall instead of actually training. That's enough of me. How's your dad? Today was the start of his new position, right? Well, I tell you what, he's definitely pretty excited about it. Got a brand new armor set, increased pay, new gear, and he was put in charge of the scouts. Who wouldn't be excited? If there was a bad thing, it would be the fact he would have to be away for long periods sometimes. Thankfully, that wouldn't be for a while yet. Out of the 50 people we hired to be part of the Laja militia, 10 of them would be primarily scouts, and her dad would be in charge of them. He was already doing scout work prior to all of this, so he had some experience. But from what I've heard, even he never did anything like what Grandpa was going to ask of them. It would be just a few tens of miles here and there. Grandpa was going to ask them to go all over what was left of America. He would start small, and eventually there might be 10 times the amount of scouts we had right now roaming all over the place. But yeah, she wasn't wrong to say her dad could be gone for long periods. How long is the training going to be? I think my uncle told me, but I don't really remember. About 3 more months from what Dad says. 1 month of combat training and 1 month of field training plus some other things, and finally one last month of putting it all together. That was a long time, but it made sense. It was like Grandpa and the others were experts on the matters either, but the shop now had plenty of training material to purchase and use. I'm sure with every ensuing training cycle our training methods would get more and more precise. The fact that we were doing organized training for 3 months was already much better than nothing. I doubt anyone would be worse off after the training than they were before it began. Grandpa wanted the Laja militia to be a serious force to contend with, and 3 months of training would go a long way to making sure that was true. Plus, all of them had taken on official professions as well. Though we only provided the options of Solider and Scout, but there were quite a few tied to the military in some way. Needless to say, it's been a very interesting week, as things kicked off all over Laja, and many things were changing each minute of every day. Hell, I wonder what Laja would even look like in 3 months. While the members of the Melita needed to train to actually be a proper military force, the same couldn't be said for the construction folks. They had already began demoing quite a few buildings that all over the place. Some places would obviously be repurposed as needed, but between the earthquakes and the fighting, not every building was stable, or even suited for the new Laja Grandpa had plans to build. The town, or maybe it can officially be a city now, would be a proper fortress by the time he was done with it. And what about you, Miss Iris? Tired of stalking me on the beach yet? She snorted. I was here long before you and you know it. Don't need to act all shy, Freddy. And I'll have you know that my dad managed to purchase a profession book on alchemy for me. Oh really? You? Doing alchemy? I'm sure there was some sort of stalking profession out there that would fit you just fine. She threw a handful of sand at me, and we laughed a bit. So, why alchemy? Didn't take you for the potion making in a lab type. Honestly, neither did I, but I thought long and hard about it, and I wanted to do something that could support Dad. I'm not really much of a fighter, and construction wasn't really my thing. There was probably some other profession books that Dad could get at some point, but the alchemy one was being offered at market price, and based on what I've heard, I'd be able to pack him up with so much potions he'd probably get high off them or something. I'm sure your dad appreciates that a lot. Not many parents can say the same thing. Well, not many parents are good to their kids. He is out there risking his life for me. It's only right I can help him out, too. What about me? I think I deserve some discounts on potions after not reporting your stalking to the authorities. 143. Water breathing. B3. My conversation with Iris didn't last too much longer since Ascendant poked out of the water at some point and beckoned me in for the second half of my training. After saying my goodbyes, I stepped into the ocean and followed Ascendant out to our usual shark-infested location. No words needed to be said at this point unless she was going to introduce something new, since I knew the drill by now. Get far as hell from the coast, then sink to the ocean flow. From there it was actually pretty simple. Learn to breathe with the water, rise back up to the top without movement, and become so one with not just water itself, but the ocean, so that the sharks view me as the dominant predator and ignore me. I almost didn't want to believe that last one at first, but not a single shark ever swam too close to my trio of guards. In fact, they actively avoided them as much as possible. She also mentioned that being ignored was only the first step. Sharks and any other animals in the ocean below a certain level of intellect should see me as an ally. Now that one I found even harder to believe because not even Ascendant had accomplished that. But when I asked, she mentioned it would be impossible for her at her current grade. Her people were a race of apex predators in the ocean. Being seen as anything but a predator simply wouldn't be possible for a while. But a princeling was different, especially one that was born a human. The path I now walk in the form of that class naturally wants to be one with water and the depths it held. Not only would this path lead me to the peak and grant me dominance within the deep ocean, but it would also bring my favorability from the beings who called the ocean home. That was a long way off, though, since I'm nowhere near close to the dominant part of things. Maybe if I didn't have to worry about breathing or getting the water to carry me to the surface without swimming, then I could lock down all three. But no, I needed to work on everything all at once. So what this ended up being was me about 300 feet away from the surface, which was still close enough to see the sun penetrating through, and I didn't have to look too far to see a literal cliff where it got even deeper. I know I was the princeling of the abyss, so I probably shouldn't fear the deep ocean. And I don't, for the most part, but a small part of me refuses to even consider diving so low that I'd be surrounded by perpetual darkness. Anyway, I wasn't ready for that yet. At the moment, I was currently trying to get the whole breathing part right and completely given up on the idea of rising to the top without swimming and getting sharks to ignore me. Scientifically, I understood what I needed to do: take the oxygen from the water and use it to breathe without allowing my lungs to fill up with water. But simply earth sciences weren't the only thing at play here. The big thing to focus on wasn't an oxygen molecule, but mana. Or maybe it was both. I don't know for sure yet, and Ascendant hasn't really explained much. So I've kind of been dancing around in the dark here, hoping to stumble into the solution. I've tried imagining the whole H2O thing with water and separating the oxygen part while willing the rest to leave my body, but that failed spectacularly, and I almost drowned. The heir to a water god drowning, how crazy would that be? But I didn't give up, and I tried that method for most of this past week. It didn't work at all, but at least now I can cross it off the list of things to try. Next was mana. The problem was I didn't really understand how to get the mana in the water to do what I wanted it to do. I know I needed oxygen to breathe, and I know my lungs filling up with water was bad. How was mana supposed to help me in that situation? It seemed simply on paper, but in practice I was struggling like shit. I didn't have gills to filter the water for me, and I don't really plan on trying to create a gill trait. It didn't help that I wasn't allowed to sit still and focus, since sharks kept coming even if I was to kill everyone that approached. They would keep coming, so I got pretty good at redirecting them and dodging their dives. Spent a lot less energy that way, and no matter what I did, the sharks would keep coming, so I redirected them or dodged. No matter what I did, can't I do something similar with water? No matter what I did, the water was going to keep coming, and there's something there, Freddy, what is it? As I was thinking, that rotated a shark that wasn't quite a tiger shark. I think that's a tiger shark, but I pushed its snout around and gave it a light tap to the side, basically pushing it away. Then I sank back into my thoughts. Let's take a step back. Without doing anything at all, I could naturally hold my breath longer down here simply due to being in the E grade and having a much greater lung capacity. Along with that, water naturally revitalized my energy unconsciously. I never had to think about it. Just being in water was enough to keep going for much longer than I was capable of. Even now, as Ascendant restricted that particular passive ability, I still got a faint trace of energy from water anyway. I need to stop thinking about oxygen completely. My body isn't the same as it used to be. Before all of this began, diving into the ocean didn't fill me with energy and help to heal my wounds. So why am I fighting the water? Why am I trying to keep it out? Ascendant made it clear that this is a path that I'm walking. meaning until I took it to completion, there would be steps to take. The system is already doing a lot of that for me, but where in the system does it say that water would give me energy? Nowhere. Okay, I'm getting distracted. I need to take the next step on my path. Right now, water gives me energy. How does it do it? Likely through some unconscious application of mana. But how does mana itself give me energy? What even is energy? I don't think I'm going to answer that question here. I just need to apply the same logic. Mana through water gives me energy specifically through water. I didn't get mana from fire or even the air, but through water. So, why can't I use mana through water to breathe? My body already gets energy from it. Why can't it help me breathe? How do I breathe? My lungs intake air, filter out oxygen, and gets in the bloodstream, which gets all over my body using my heart, right? I think that's close enough. Mana is already being pumped all throughout my body. So don't worry about getting rid of the water. Just breathe the mana. I opened my mouth to test it out, and it was an epic failure. I kicked off the ground and bolted to the surface and spitting up some water as I gasped for air. Ascendant surfaced not long after and no sharks followed. I'm sure it's something she did. You're on the right path, but breathing through mana does not mean to stop breathing through other means. It simply means to add mana to the list of things that are breathable. Along with that, I don't think it means you should allow your breathing organs to be filled with water. Simply take what you need from it and keep the rest out. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. 119.5. Real mature, B2. I wanted to stop Grandpa, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. He had the sort of face that let me know immediately that nothing short of violence would stop him from doing what he set out to do. And it was obvious what his plans were. Heeding my warning, no one challenged Battle 50 in all this time. I really didn't think it was a battle anyone here could win without seriously risking their lives. There wasn't any land to stand on, and having to fight something like that in its natural habitat wouldn't be easy. Grandpa knew that. Sigh. The old man will be fine, I hope. When morning came around, I almost had the exact same interaction with my dad and uncles. It was barely even a conversation. I told them what happened in the dungeon and what Grandpa did last night. Color me surprised when all of them wanted to follow after him to go do the same damn thing. I couldn't believe it. On one hand, I understand and appreciate the care they are all showing for me by trying to get as strong as possible in an effort to help me out. But at least Grandpa was practically demi by now. He had integrated his traits and fused them into a gene. No one else had accomplished the same just yet. I couldn't let them rush off to their deaths in good faith like that. I just couldn't. That didn't go down too well. Who would have thought raising my voice at my dad and uncles wouldn't result in a negative atmosphere? By the end of it all, we all stormed out of the house and even ignored the calls of my aunts and mother. I was genuinely upset. I get it, man. They care about me, and they are probably a little embarrassed by the fact their son and nephew respectively was stronger than them, and now I had my own shit to deal with and they couldn't help. I get it. I'm not naive or oblivious to those facts, but why the hell couldn't they understand where I was coming from? The Leviathan was going to fucking murder them. I have already lost 2 uncles, and one-armed grandpa stormed off in the middle of the night. Was I supposed to just keep quiet and let them die? I didn't understand or agree with that at all. It's like looking at a blue sky and getting mad that it was blue. It was out of our control, and logically there was nothing we could do to change it. So why get angry or run off to make a stupid decision that will almost certainly lead to someone dying? I couldn't stand by that at all. So for the first time in a long time, I didn't listen to either of my parents and went for a walk. A long walk. There were people out and about doing their best to go on with their lives. 1 or 2 of them greeted me as I walked, not because of who I was or anything like that, just a good old-fashioned good morning. Things like that had gone away for a while at the beginning of all this, but people were calmer now. More at peace, I think. Well, maybe that wasn't too accurate, but it's been a long time since any sort of attack happened, and I think Grandpa and the others have done a good job of inspiring safety and stability in the people that remained here. Before I knew it or even really realized where I was headed, I found myself on the beach. Not seeing any real reason to turn around, I walked to where water met sand and just took a seat, allowing the water to wash up to my ankles. Of course, my shoes were off to the side. It's been a while since I've been here, just enjoying the view and feeling the sand and water go between my toes. It was nice. I stayed that way for about an hour, not really thinking about anything that mattered, and I sorta kinda zoned out a bit. That was probably not a good thing to do when the damn lava people could make an appearance any second now, but I did, and it was why I didn't even notice the approach of, well, I don't know who this is. You're one of the Williams boys, right? I looked over at the girl who approached me. She was probably close to me in age or perhaps a little older, I wasn't sure, but she was dressed in the typical leather stuff you could get in the regular shop and carried a sword on her waist. One of the Williams boys. I haven't heard that since all this here started. Of course, the Williams boys was referring to me and Raycon, and while his last name technically wasn't Williams it was Williams, but it didn't change the fact we were the Williams family, and since we are close in age, we've spent a lot of time together. That makes sense. Well, Williams boy, what you doing out here all by yourself? Don't you gotta go protect Ladger and all that? I couldn't help but cringe, especially since she said it sarcastically and was clearly joking. "Aw, you were there for that little speech my family gave, huh?" She smirked. Boy, almost all of Ladger was cramped up in that dungeon to hear that speech. My own dad even kinda works for your family now, going out to scout every single day just because that one-armed old man asked for it. She didn't seem like she was joking now. I didn't respond and just stared at her. I know Grandpa and the others didn't force anyone to do anything, and everyone who helped us out was essentially a volunteer. Don't worry, I'm not complaining. He gets paid for it, and he doesn't have to risk his life going into the dungeon to earn coins for us anymore. I'm thankful, don't worry. It's just different. I honestly didn't know we're explicitly paying people, but I guess that makes sense. Giving people food and supplies would only go so far. People wanted to earn their keep. And with how often we ran through the dungeons, we likely had quite a few coins to our name. I suppose that's good. Yeah, I understand. One day things were like they've always been, and then boom, life just goes to shit. There was some silence there for a moment, but before it could stretch into awkwardness, I added, "And what about you? Why are you out here? Shouldn't you be back in Ladger enjoying all that safety I'm working to provide?" She chuckled before rolling her eyes at me. "I come out here every day, thank you very much." I raised my hands in mock surrender, and we laughed a bit more at that. "Hey, isn't that the other Williams boy?" She was still standing, but now she was looking back towards the city. I turned to follow her gaze, and there he was. Raycon slowly walking towards was, and even from here I could see snicker painted all over his face. Sigh. Yeah, that's him all right. Well, I'll leave you to it, Williams boy. I'll sleep safely tonight knowing you're out there keeping Ladger safe. Of course, that line was laced with sarcasm as well. Yeah. She walked away after that, throwing a wave towards Raycon in the process that he returned with the brightest smile I've ever seen him make. The smile somehow got brighter when he finally reached where I was sitting, and I knew right then that I would never hear the end of this. Snuck off to see your girlfriend while the whole family is worried about you, Hakazo. Real mature of you, buddy. 144. Updates and tests, B3. Before I realized another month passed while I and the rest of Ladger settled into a routine. Train twice a day, talk to Iris in between, and play catch-up on what the rest of the family has been up to in the meantime. Raycon, for example, finally integrated one of his traits, and I don't think the next one is too far off. And it wasn't just him, all members of the family were making progress in their own ways. Uncle Mac really took hold of his new position as the head of our construction department. He still hit the dungeon from time to time, since he still wanted to grow his class level, but his primary focus was overseeing all construction efforts. He was even saving up to buy an advanced profession surrounding it. Now Uncle Robert, on the other hand, decided to switch with Dad on the management of the Laja Melita. He didn't mind doing it, but he wanted to focus on being a blacksmith. Apparently, he felt the smithy's call or something and bought a common blacksmith profession to go along with it. He also still hit the dungeon regularly, and I could swear he was growing bigger. Which of course left Dad directly in charge of the Laja Melita, and I think he was doing a pretty good job. They trained hard every single day, and for the last month I watched them run up and down the beach every single morning before scampering back into Laja to do more shit. Iris's dad was a part of the group, of course, but she spent her morning studying alchemy now, so she never got to see. Though she did always stop by after my morning session of training. Hehe. Anyway, I was looking forward to the things Uncle Robert would eventually make, especially since we completed a trade with the other factions we met during the gate phase. Uncle Lenny took care of that. I thought we would be sending the scout team to go handle it, but they were locked into training, so Uncle Lenny volunteered, and I think he enjoyed it based on all the stories he told. He didn't go alone, of course. It was him and his wife, Aunt Risha. She wasn't too happy about it initially, but she wouldn't let him go by himself, and I think she came back in a better mood. Especially since it wasn't like they were dragging wagons of supplies back. Instead, we purchased one of the coolest thing I've ever seen from the shop in this big-ass backpack that had a much larger space on the inside. It was literally one of the cheapest options possible, and the space wasn't much bigger than a linen closest, but it weighed more than a backpack. And even though it was one of the cheapest options, Grandpa said it took up almost half of our total capital, which was insane. But worth it for trade purposes. Roads weren't good enough to get some big caravan going, nor did we have any labor animals or a motor for a car. Though I did hear someone was trying to fix our cars, but I have a feeling that it will take a while. Either way, we had some new stuff that we got through trade and learned quite a bit about what's going on north of us. More and more communities were sprouting up, but so too was crime. There weren't any police officers to arrest people, nor were there courts for them to get judged in. Honestly, I think the only reason we haven't experienced many problems here was because they were scared of Grandpa. The one-armed old man could be seen every single day going in and out of the snakebite dungeon and coming out with a bag filled with his spoils. I would tell him to slow down, but he was literally filled with energy and never looked better than he did now. But I do think part of him is still not happy with the fact my parents, aunts and uncles all chose the rough path to E-grade. He's not mad at them per se, but mad that he wasn't strong enough to shoulder the weight by himself. He's probably going to be the first of us to reach D-grade, or at least the peak of Eosania has reminded me before that crossing into D-grade isn't really a simple matter. Anyway, Mom, who never really liked the fighting, has been helping Aunt Kimberly in the little hospital that was still kind of being built. It wasn't outfitted with a whole bunch of tools and fancy equipment like a regular hospital, but for now, it was the thought that counts. Especially since we still had people getting injured around the clock. We never stopped folks from going into the dungeons, just verified they had gear, and we charged a small entrance fee. Most people didn't want to pay to risk their lives for no reason, so anyone that did go through with it were usually able. But they came out with injuries from time to time, and Aunt Kimberly and my mom, along with her small team of medical professionals, took care of them. Sometimes for a cost, sometimes for free. I don't really know how they determined that. Either way, they were doing their thing. Aunt Abigail was running the admin stuff, and while I understood the need for it, I was interested in seeing how it played out, and needless to say, I feel so bad for those people. With no computers to speak of, they are documenting every single thing that goes on in Laja, every coin and system credit spent or earned, all by hand, and having to create a safe file system for everything. They are even working with Grandpa on laws for Laja and drafting that up. It sounded like hell to do so much writing, and I didn't even them one bit. Heard they got paid well enough, though. Aunt Renee was kind of the only one who wasn't headlining a particular group, but she's been much better as of late, and seems like she wants to work on getting a school for kids together. We're all hoping she decides to do it, even if it was just to get her to smile more. But things were progressing, and while the sharks still bother me, it wasn't quite the same rate they did before. I'm not even sure what I was doing to make that better, it was just happening naturally. The breathing thing was interesting too. I could take the faintest bit of mana from the water and circulate in my body, but it was doing a number of things instead of just allowing me to breathe. It wasn't bad per se, and I could stay underwater for a few hours now without problems, but not indefinitely. I wanted to be able to stay underwater for as long as I wanted. I'm still nowhere near close to beating Ascendant in the water, though, and she refuses to fight me on land. Not that I think I'd win or anything, but I should do a little better than what I do now. Anyway, I hadn't been doing much else for the past month, but that finally about to change. I've been meaning to go grind in the snakebite dungeon with Grandpa or even go do the E-grade challenges in the gauntlet dungeon, but new training and more lessons. I technically didn't need to listen to her, but I was improving every day, so my complaints weren't truly complaints. I even learned the whole language thing was just system fuckery at play. Raycon and I got a good laugh out of that one. But it was time Ascendant wanted me to test my improvements against real opponents. The only problem is, it's not going to be against wild sharks or dungeon beasts. There were people, an organized force of some kind heading towards Laja right this second, and they were armed. Now I would have thought that Ascendant had some type of divination ability, but she only brought up testing my abilities after disappearing during my post-morning session break, and coming back to say that people were coming. She said about 30 people, armed and heading directly here. So of course I warned my family, and now I standing on the north side of Laja with Grandpa and my entire family. The Laja militia wasn't here though, but instead on my standby further in the city. No need to show our full capabilities just yet. Ooh, and here they are, a little over 30 and all armed with weapons, walking in force towards us. It wasn't a straight walk due to how bad the roads were, but we could see them from here. They'll probably get here in another hour or so. At their current pace, let's see how this plays. 145. Keep calm, B3. My name is Lieutenant Richards, and I'm here on official business of the New America Army. I'm assuming you folks are the ones holding temporary charge of this area. I flexed my fists a bit at that temporary word. I have no doubt it was intentional, and no one here would have missed it. Grandpa probably didn't appreciate it one bit. He stepped forward not armed at all, and he didn't need to be. If a single one of these guys twitched the wrong way, I would flatten every single one of them. My name is Lance Williams, and I am the head of the Williams family faction. You are standing in the territory that we rule. Rule is a strong word there, Mr. Williams. This land that you speak of is Florida, one of 50 states in New America, formerly known as the United States of America. While your hard work in managing this area due to the crisis we faced as nation can be recognized and rewarded, this land is American soil. It will be returned to her. It will not. I had a feeling this Lieutenant Richards fellow probably expected Grandpa to either shirk back or maybe respond in anger and a long tirade. I will not. Yeah, Grandpa could be gangsta too. There was a tense silence for a moment, and my mana was already circulating, just begging to be used. Now that I think about it, this whole process felt a whole lot easier. My mana was literally moving like flowing water. Something to investigate later. For now, I wonder what the lieutenant plans to do. We did not come here to fight, Mr. Williams. All we seek is to reconnect a disconnected America once again. A new government is in place, and many teams like mine are moving to various places doing the same thing I'm doing. We have orders to make it all the way south of here, so why not reconvene on this on our way back, to allow cooler heads to prevail. I'll say it one more time, Lieutenant Richards. You are in the territory of the Williams family, the one in which we rule, and as of right now, I don't think you're welcome to continue further. Again, with that word rule. Are you going to stand in our way, Mr. Williams? We have orders, and while they include avoiding violence if possible, they do not forbid it. There's no need for violence, but unfortunately my family and I aren't strangers to it. Make your decision. Lieutenant Richards tensed, and yep, it's only men, but all of them tensed just along with him. Weapons were gripped tighter, and I could feel the mana in them getting ready to unleash. I wondered, did Lieutenant Richards know he was standing in front of a family of E-grades? If what I was feeling through the mana in their bodies was to be trusted, they were all F-grades, including the lieutenant. I was more than happy to let Grandpa talk and handle things, and while I wouldn't mind the exercise, I wasn't in a hurry to kill 30 people. Not when it can be avoided. Now if I try to broker some peace and they ignore the warning and push forward, then, well, the ocean isn't too far away. So I stepped up next to Grandpa and spoke. Lieutenant Richards right, are all of you in the F grade? He looked a little surprised, but his brows immediately narrowed, and even though he didn't answer, I could tell I was right. Every single one of them was in the F grade, and they obviously couldn't tell that we were clearly not. I mean, on one hand I wanted to be shocked, but none of these people were at the gate, and I'm willing to bet a vast majority of humans are still F grade, so it's no surprise they weren't sending a bunch of E grades on scout patrols all over the country, if that was even true. Sigh. I allowed my mana to flood out and weigh on the men before me. Not enough to force them to their knees, but enough where they couldn't really do anything else but to focus on staying on their feet. Do you feel that, Lieutenant? That is the difference between you and the people you are looking at. If I was an evil man, you would all be dead right now. Turn around, don't do anything you won't live to regret. I lifted my mana and a few of them gasped and fell down to their knees at that point, and I know my parents, especially my mother, was staring holes in the back of my head. But if I never turned around, I could pretend not to notice. Yes, this is the way. Now, by the time the lieutenant had caught his breath, the man looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. The tension had dissipated like the receding tide, and I could tell there was no more fight in any of them. They looked a little angry, some perhaps a bit fearful, but nobody wanting to risk their life in a fight. Point taken. Thank you for your time, Mr. Williams. Grandpa only gave him a nod in return, and they turned around, basically speed walked away, clearly not wanting to be seen running. We stood and watched them in silence for a bit, before Grandpa finally turned around and faced us. Good job there, Freddy. I guess I need to learn a thing or two about diplomacy from you going forward. For everyone else, our plans need to speed up a bit. I don't think for one second that this will be the end of that. Either they will come back with an army or send a proper delegation. In both scenarios, we need to be stronger than we are now to ensure we have the better position in a fight or any negotiations. Speed up the militia's training and ensure Laja is under constant patrol. I initially planned on waiting before expanding the Melita, but time doesn't really like agreeing with me. So immediately get a second batch of recruits going, and this time upgrade it to 100 people. I'm going to be extending our territory rapidly, so I'll personally pay a visit to Broward and bring them into the fold as well. I know they got hit hard by the aliens, but there are still plenty of people there and another dungeon, so let's extend our umbrella. Once they are secure, we will push north. With that being said, Freddy, can you spare some time from your training? We're going to need a lot more income as we ramp up, and you'll be a big help. The answer to that was obvious. I've been wanting to get back in the dungeon anyway, and this was good as an excuse as any. Asania would just have to understand. Though I did have a question for her. Turns out she or my other guards weren't far off from our little Western showdown moment just now, just standing in the back where they wouldn't be a bother. Asania, I have a quick question. Yes, Princeling. Yeah, this whole Princeling thing, I have benefits, right? You're obviously training me and guarding me from something, but surely there's more to it. Are you able to give me stuff, like money or weapons, for example? Yes, but with restrictions. I almost tripped. What do you mean, yes? Why haven't you said anything? You never asked, Princeling. I know, keep calm, Freddy, keep calm. 146. Asania's reasons, B3. I was initially more than willing to wait for Asania to explain certain things as time passed, and she did, Little by little, I would be given more information about various topics. I had many questions about way too many things to have it all explained in just one session. The problem with that is the fact that I was willing to wait because I wrongly assumed that anything I didn't know as of yet wouldn't be benefiting me all that much in the short term. If it was something that I wouldn't need to know for years to come or was just nice to know information, then no rush at all. But if she was purposely holding back knowledge that would not only benefit me, but would benefit my family, then that would have to change now. I was never one to beg, especially since I was blessed enough to have a family that was in the financial position they were in. I won't pretend like I grew up struggling, but I'm also not too prideful enough to accept help when it was available. So I sat Asania down to have a conversation. I need to understand this princeling shit and everything I can do with this title I didn't ask for. We've talked a little about this before, but I am a princeling of the abyss, a potential heir to the god you serve. If I understand everything correctly, while you or perhaps in the people in your faction wouldn't have chosen me in a million years to be your princeling, your god did. Now there are those among you who want to kill me or control me. You people don't want that, or at least not openly. So if this is going to continue, I need to know exactly what I'm working with here. What are my rights as princeling? What is my level of authority among your people? And how much do you truly value your god and the title they have bestowed on me? Mind you, against my wishes. This was the first time I think I've seen real anger on Asania's face. Even the mana in the room started to get heavier the angrier she got. Now I don't think I could take her in a fight, and I don't know what type of treasures she was carrying on her. But if push came to shove, I was ready to unleash everything I had in me at her. I had no illusions about who she was. This woman and her companions were not my friends. Then it all deflated. Calm yourself, princeling. I am not your enemy and I apologize for my actions. I didn't say anything, but I at least relaxed a bit. Not enough to not able to react if I needed to, but my mana wasn't circulating with vigor at the moment. But I didn't have anything to say, so I just waited. Asania then sighed. Princeling, while I do not dare to understand the actions of the god of the depths, I will admit to you that I was not the happiest to learn that the newest princeling was a human, especially a human that didn't belong to any established force in the entire faction of water, but one who was still bumbling their way through E-grade on a world under siege. With all due respect, princeling, there are far more qualified beings among my people and the faction of water that would be more deserving of such a title. Then to hear you speak of the fact you did not ask for this class, nor do you want it, and on top of that you question my commitment to the god of the depths. For a moment I almost lost myself to anger, but that was unbecoming of me. Deep down I know the truth. We are not good enough. The trials and challenges you will have to face and survive are not few, and most of them will involve a real risk of death. Some practically guarantee it. The number of people who have died over the years in an effort to climb to the peak just by failing a particular trial. People who would have or could have go on to shock the multiverse dying before their names could grow past their own homes. Sai, you understand I am here to protect you, right? From other factions among my very own people. All of us equally respect the role of princeling, but the god of the depths does not forbid killing one. While it is frowned upon, it is not a crime. It is considered another challenge that the princeling must overcome. But that is not the way of my own faction, and we truly would want for you to rise the position your path dictates. You asked what the benefits of being a princeling are? You are a ruler, a being with the potential to command A grades, to speak among mortals on behalf of the god of the depth himself. All Dipthians and those in our direct faction will follow your will for as long as it doesn't go against the god of the depths. Money, weapons, it is yours already. You are a princeling of the abyss, chosen of the god of the depths, and among my people your word is law. Or at least it should be. Just like all factions, there are internal problems with us as well, but for the most part, you will truly be treated like royalty, and once a proper contingent is able to reach this world, you will understand what that means in full. But for now, if it is money you seek, then yes, princeling, I can provide it. I'm glad she kinda brought me back down to earth at the end there because I was starting to feel like I was the man round here. Money, weapons. It was mine already. My word was law. I was struggling to fight down the arrogant Freddy deep within that wanted to drop his balls and walk around like he was a king. Thankfully, she provided some assistance there with all the talk of internal struggling and all that. Anyway, I think I know exactly why she didn't like me now, and why the woman before me was likely still in E grade. She wanted the title of princeling for herself, and I could only imagine how much it hurt to see something she probably worked her whole life for get taken by some brat, who she then had to guard and train. Honestly, if I was her, I'd be sick to my stomach. Shit, she probably was. I doubt this little tell-all that she was doing would suddenly make her feel better. Treat me better. Sure, but feelings like this didn't go away that easily. But that's all right with me. Her and her faction wants to use me for their own goals, so nothing has changed on my end. I will do the same for them. I understand, Asania. Now regarding the money, how much of it can you provide to me? I was permitted to give you no more than 100,000 system credits. You will have access to a lot more than that in the future, but for the circumstances, this is all that has been allotted. I wanted to shake her and scream about how much money that was, but I managed to maintain my decorum. 100,000 system credits. I want to see just who on this whole planet will dare to come challenge Grandpa and our family for Laja by the time we were done spending this. But before I could go run off to tell Grandpa the good news, I had other questions to ask, and I was going to get all of them out. Right now. 147. New path ahead, B3. It late at night as I once again found myself on the beach staring out into the ocean. This time, Irene wasn't out here to join me. Of course, I wasn't truly alone, though, since Asania and the other two weren't standing too far away. All good, though. By now it was pretty easy to just treat them like air. But I wouldn't have minded Irene's presence at all, though unfortunately she was out with her dad at the new restaurant in Laja. A whole restaurant. Who would have thought we would ever reach a point that someone would be opening a restaurant again? It was simple, and at the moment they were only serving dinner, but I heard they planned on expanding services in the coming days. What made it special, though, was the fact the family had no parts at getting it set up. The only thing we helped with was getting it all set up for a price and signing a deal for supplies. It was an older Jamaican lady and her son who got it up and running, and they were making Jamaican food, or as close as possible to it as they could. Needless to say, as the only restaurant in Laja, they were pretty popular, and on the 3 nights they've been open, the small building has been sold out each night. Good for them, and I'm sure they won't be the only business popping up here in the future. Especially with Grandpa currently down south brining all of that into our territory. I'm glad I caught up with him before he left a couple days ago, and once I gave him the news about the influx of system credits I now had access to, he was beaming. Apparently upgrading our faction node was the means in which our territory would grow, and there were quite a few different levels at the moment. Right now it was at Tier 1, and it cost 1,000 credits to get it to Tier 2, and that came with a whole host of changes that we were not prepared for. First of all, the entirety of Laja and a little past it was no officially Williams family faction territory, and that was recognized by the system. Secondly, people living in that territory can now be registered through the system as citizens, and there was a whole lot more to it than that, but it was something for Grandpa to worry about. Then came Tier 3, and according to Grandpa, our territory now went far west in the Everglades, covered all of Broward County, and stretched up Port St. Lucie. Right about now, there could be thousands of people getting notifications about being in our territory, and I'm sure a lot of them, if not all of them, are freaking out. Thankfully, we wouldn't be going to Tier 4 anytime soon, since Tier 3 alone was a massive 10,000 credits, while the next tier added another 0 to that number. Not something we could afford right now. Needless to say, Grandpa and the admin team would need to ramp up our operations quickly to make sure we had people in place to manage all of this claimed territory. It would take a while to put trusted folks in place, but I'm sure they could handle it just fine. Me, on the other hand, I would focus on getting stronger. One way or another, there will be more battles to come in the future, and I needed to be ready. So while I didn't get a chance to properly test my new capabilities a few days ago when that lieutenant came on by, I would be doing a lot more than that for a while. Spend my days training, take a break, then spend my nights grinding. I hadn't gained a new level in a long time, even though I felt a bit stronger despite that. Goes to show that levels weren't the end-all-be-all to everything. Not that I could tell what someone's level was. Either way, after pressing Ascendant for answers to various things, I had a much better understanding of how I wanted to grow. Firstly, a profession was unfortunately not in my cards at all. At least not for a while, since my current class would not allow me to pick one up even if I wanted to. Another benefit from the god of the depths I couldn't get out of. Secondly, I've kind of been trying to do this all-arounder thing, but that's not really my path forward now, is it? I've known since the very beginning the specializing was probably the best option. But I was getting stronger and winning battles. I even dominated that old lava lady. What I was doing clearly wasn't wrong, but according to Ascendant, it would be once I started fighting actual geniuses who were bred for the art of killing. Now it wasn't like being good at everything and being versatile was bad, but the wider I stretched my path, the harder it would be to bring it to a focal point. So what did I want to be? I thought I knew the answer to this question already, but a lot has changed since the last time I gave it real thought. So what did I want really? A powerful mage-type build where I throw tsunami at someone's head, or perhaps a brawler where water would support me instead. What about the fight on the lava planet? How was that? I fought mainly with my hands, but my mana itself and its specific properties were integral to my success. Sigh. No matter which way I sliced it, my answer stayed the same. I wanted it all. I wanted to be able to lift my hand and lift entire oceans along with, but I also wanted to be able to take one step and flatten a damn city or something. Was that really too much to ask for? Why can't I do both? Ascendant technically didn't say I couldn't, now did she? Just that there were plenty of others who specialized in one way or another and were extremely deadly. And I get that. The whole don't fear someone who knows 1,000 moves, but someone who practices one move 1,000 times right. I get it. But why can't I practice 1,000 moves 1,000 different times? Name: Fred Williams. Born world: Earth, ENWPI 70059. Race: human. Faction: the Williams family. Age: 17. Grade: E. Level: 58. XP: 78,555, 187035. Mana: 705,705. Stat points: 21. Gene: 1 Abyssium Unbound. Traits: Class: Current class: Princeling of the Abyss. Class passive: Welcome to the Depths. Class grade: NA. Class rarity: NA. Skills: 1 Aqua Barrage Unbound. 2 Ocean's Maw Unbound. 3 Abyss Verdict Unbound. Attributes: Strength 164. Dexterity 125. Vitality 138. Endurance 137. Mana 141. Willpower 112. Perception 112. Intelligence 112. Alright, 21 stat points to spend. I could easily dump all of them into mana to maximize my ability with water, but I loved being able to be a menace with my body, and I'm not willing to give that up. But all my other stats? Yeah, I might have to allow them to fall to the wayside a bit. 11 points in strength and 10 in mana. I confirmed my decision and felt that familiar burn once again as the changes took place in my body. It used to hurt like shit if I dumped that many at once, but it was just added warmth now. Either way, I now had 175 points in strength and 151 in mana, which of course meant my mana pool also climbed to 755. All right, time to hit the gauntlet again and to see if anything's been changed with the church. 148. Wolf. B3. Ah, it's been a really long time you've graced us with your presence, young Freddy. Far too long in my opinion, but it's no matter. What's important is that you're here now and apparently doing far better than the last time I've seen you. Is that water quasin wood I see? It's not the strongest wood you can get out there, but there isn't much better you can get out there when it comes to handling water mana on the market for its price point. Great choice considering your skill shit. And ah, what a beautiful spearhead, let's see here. Oh, ooh, that's Dipthian blue steel, right? That's not something you can buy with just money, but I suppose that's quite normal for you considering you are now rather important among their people. Then there is your armor, a full-body premium kit made from Collinor leather. Their skin is said to be as tough as iron and flexible as bamboo. I'm sure you have a bit more things tucked away, but I'd say you are geared up nicely for the challenges ahead, young Freddy. Of course, I didn't just spend money upgrading the faction node. I've been without proper gear to match my new level of power for a long time now. I did enjoy fighting with my hands, of course, but man, it just felt good to hold a spear again, especially one that was compatible with my skill set. So I was willing to admit that I walked into this dungeon with my chest a bit puffed out. Almost like the feeling you get the night before the first day of school when your brand new outfit was laid out on the bed ready to go. I'm sure the acolyte would have noticed my good mood since he never seemed to miss anything, but to think he would call out my gear without missing a beat like he was reading the descriptions straight out of a flyer. It didn't ruin my good mood completely, but I suddenly felt like the person who bought the fancy, useless designer item just because it had a designer name. My stomach would probably feel sick if I didn't know that it went a lot different than that. In fact, I probably would have bought the shiny, fancy stuff if I didn't have Asania there to help me out, and it was her guidance that I made the purchases I did. That didn't include the spear, though. The acolyte was right. That wasn't something I could buy from the shop just because. The access needed to do so would be eventually granted to me at some point, but not right now because that would give away my position very easily. Thankfully, Asania had won. Shame she couldn't provided it sooner, but that was all right. This was good for now. Anyway, it wasn't just me who benefited. All in all, I suddenly went from having access to 100,000 system credits to 75,000 very quickly. Buying new equipment for the family wasn't all that expensive, and until the family was generating tens of thousands of credits on their own, there was no need to splurge too heavily. So everyone got new gear and a few more purchases with Ladger in mind got made, but that was Grandpa's business. Mine was here. Thank you for the warm welcome as always, Acolyte Aranda. How has everything been for you and the church? Ah, that's no problem. And well, neither I nor the church can complain too much, young Freddy. We were willing to wait for quite some time for this planet to potentially survive the subjugation, but we were pleased to be done with that quite early, and especially pleased to learn the grade of the planet went up as well. There are many moving pieces in place, and few more dungeons have already been placed on the planet, along with a proper branch of the church. Can't miss an opportunity to teach others the ways of the grind. That gave me pause. They were actively spreading their religion on Earth as we speak. Did they plan to convert the whole of Earth or something, and perhaps make this their territory? Or am I just being paranoid? You were your thoughts too plainly, young Freddy. I can assure you that the church has no interests in claiming this planet as one of their own. Nor do we force anyone to join our church. To those that respect the grind, then our doors will be open. For everyone else, then they need not concern themselves with us. Though I will share this with you, it is not the church you should worry about claiming your planet under their umbrella. There are already others sowing seeds here. It is not often a newly integrated planet with C-grade potential shows up without going through a formal integration. And in your case, a 100-year window that the people of this planet would have had to grow during Phase 4. All the resources that have yet be touched, all the new dungeons that have yet be explored, and that is only a small piece of it. That period of growth is now gone, and the strongest among you are still E-grade. I can assure you, young Freddy, that the people interested are above that. So no need to worry about the church, you will soon have other factors to take up that role. Though I have a feeling that considering what you are now and who you represent, that a lot of those sharks will find there is a bigger predator in the water. Why did every interaction I have with Acolyte Aranda have to be weird in some way? I kinda believed everything he was saying to a certain extent, but why was he still smiling the entire time he spoke, damn it? Doesn't he realize how creepy that is? But he still made good points. If the church was here, and these water people helping me were here, then why couldn't other people be here? Well, that sounds like something else for Grandpa to worry about. I'll warn him when I get out of here, and I'm sure we'll send plenty of scouts out to check shit out. If something seems to be a problem, Grandpa can tell me where to point my spear, and that will be all I need to know. In the meantime, I understand Acolyte Aranda. Thanks for the information. I wish you a good grind. Of course he said that with an extra wide smile, but I paid it no mind. I was excited. A short while later and I was in a forest. Battle 51, Wolf. Based on that I knew I was still in the dungeon, but where I expected to be teleported to same stage as the first 49 battles, I found myself in a forest. I didn't let my shock kill my alertness, though, and as various thoughts ran through my mind, my spear was at the ready as I scanned my surroundings. Seems to be a regular forest. The sun was shining, but it was quiet. In forest that looks this lush, I would at least expect to hear birds. And my opponent, it was just a wolf. No special name or meaning attached to it, just a wolf. All right, so the battle against the levitation wasn't unique, but instead was a taste of what was to come. And as the first battle in the E-grade part of the dungeon, I was sent to a forest to fight what was sure to be an E-grade level wolf, in what was sure to be its preferred territory. Nothing has attacked me yet, but I have a feeling it already knew where I was. It would be best to assume it was nearby, and even if it couldn't see me, it very likely could smell me. It was a predator, and to it was I prey. Unfortunately for it, while I can't smell it or even see it right now, I was already slowly spreading my senses out along the threads of the ambient mana present here in search of it. Slowly but surely I was clearing the area, and I'm sure that I'll fi ah. There she blows. Oh, that's a big motherfucker. 149. New eyes, B3. I honestly don't know how I didn't see a wolf that was damn near the size of a mountain before it roared just now. It wasn't right next to me. In fact, it was kind of far, but holy shit, I think I can see a mountain from here, especially with my new and improved eyesight. But even then, I still couldn't see it. Now it wasn't like it had a camo coat and was blending in with the rest of the forest. It instead had a rich, dark, earthy brown coat. Now in some cases that could blend in a little bit. But that fucking size, I should have spotted it the second I got here, though I don't really have to worry about spotting it anymore since it was roaring and charging at me like a raging bull. But even though that was the case, I did not want to forget about the fact that I couldn't see it. I'll tuck it somewhere in the back of my mind during this fight, just in case it had some kind of ability to disappear from sight. In the meantime, though, I think I'll just stay right here. There's no need to run over there to meet it, and based on what I could feel from its money, which I know it wasn't the most accurate sense of strength, this thing wasn't stronger than me. It was bigger than me, and in terms of pure power, sure, it could probably hit harder than me. But what would it do when I send a leviathan made of water at its damn face? I waited, and then I got my answer of what the giant wolf would do when it got a leviathan made of water to its face. The answer is that it would fucking eat it. Once it came within range, which didn't take very fucking long, I sent off Ocean's Maw towards it, and the giant bastard didn't even bother dodging. It simply let the attack hit it directly in its face, and it brushed it off like it was just a spray of water in the summer sun. Okay, I was exaggerating a little bit, and I could see some bruises and cuts mowing its face, but clearly didn't do anything to fucking stop it. Thankfully, I wasn't expecting that to kill it, but I did hope it would have done a lot more damage than what it did, so either way I wasn't caught off guard, when the wolf kicked up a bunch of trees around me before attempting to bite, or well, I guess in this case, swallow me whole since it was big enough to do that. But I had a brand new spear, and I was itching to try it out. So when it lunged after me, I didn't run. I leapt up to meet the maw of the wolf with my spear cocked back over my head and swung it downwards with all the might my muscles could carry, while making sure there was enough mana flooding through the spear to make a dam lake. Now a spear was definitely a tool to do more thrusting than slashing with, but who the hell said it couldn't double as a hammer? BOOOOM. My spear cracked into the wolf with such force that impact alone sent any trees that weren't already uprooted by the wolf flying away. My arms shook like they just got hit with a sledgehammer, but instead of worrying about the pain I was feeling, I was instead grinning like a madman because I was the one who came out on top during that clash. The head of the wolf smashed into the ground with more force than I thought it would, like way more. I knew that wasn't just purely my muscles since there was a massive explosion of water at impact with all the mana I packed into it. The wolf and the surrounding area was literally drenched in water now. I landed with a thud as the wolf was trying to get back up. It wasn't dead yet, but it was bleeding profusely from its head, and it might even have a concussion since it was struggling to even stand. But why would I let it do that? Especially when it was now covered in water. Taking control of the water mana now all over the wolf, and adding my own mana to the mix, I pressed down on it, and stopped the massive creature from rising up and held it in place. It was not easy, and this wouldn't be something I could do for a long time, not right now. But it bought me more than enough to reposition myself on top of its head as it struggled to move with all of its might, but to no avail. And as it growled, I drove my spear into its eyeball and used Ocean's Maw. It was messy. Immediately after something I hadn't seen in quite a while showed up in front of me. To continue or to accept my rewards. Now I could definitely keep going, but I wanted to check something instead, so I chose the rewards. The choice to choose between a weapon, a skill, or a trait. Oddly enough, though, it didn't say weapon or armor this time, and I don't see any option for money like before. I wonder why that was. Could be because we've been fully integrated now, or perhaps it was the E-grade portion of the dungeon. I'm not sure. There also wasn't any XP being granted either, and I didn't get any from the wolf. A lot more stingy with E-grade. Anyway, I already knew what I was going to pick, so I made my way over to the underside of the wolf instead, and spent more than just a few laborious minutes gutting the wolf in search of a core. After getting more than just elbow deep in blood and guts, I decided to call it quits and leave. I smelled putrid even though I could wash myself off, which I did. This would require some soap. It would have been worth it if I found a core though, but there was none that I could see or find in there. Whatever, I'll just ask the acolyte if it was a one of situation, or none of the beasts I would fight had cores. I finally made my decision, which I'm thankful was still available for me at the moment, and it was always going to be a trait. I was happy with my current skills and wasn't in a hurry to change them, and I literally just bought a weapon, so there was no need for that either. But traits, that was something I could just accept without consequence since I didn't have any right now. Reward granted, trait. Pressure sight. Eyes evolved to perceive fluctuations in pressure, moisture, and mana density as naturally as ordinary sight. Oh, that's actually dope as... My eyes immediately began to burn like someone just plunged a knife in both my eye sockets that happened to be coated in the finest Texas hot sauce. Why in the fuck does it hurt so damn much? The pain was so distracting that I didn't even realize when I was teleported back to the waiting area. Young Freddy received a trait for the eyes, eh? Those are probably my least favorite types of traits, maybe perhaps the spine. That isn't much fun either. Don't worry, you'll feel a whole lot better in a second here. He was right, and in just a few seconds the pain receded like it was never there, and when I tried to open my eyes after that, I immediately snapped them shut. It felt like I was staring at a kaleidoscope. There was far too much info. Too much information all at once, right? That's usually the case when people receive a trait related to the eyes. Most people tend to underestimate just how integral eyes are to seeing the world, and how much information the most mundane eyes ever send to the brain, much less some eyes fit for an E grade. If you received those eyes in the F grade, you likely would have died. You'll be fine in no time, though young Freddy, I have no doubts. He's doing it purpose. There's no way he's not doing it on purpose. 150. SDF, B3. Exiting the dungeon, I saw that it was still deep into the night, but I didn't immediately start walking anywhere. I stood near the entrance, constantly blinking my eyes, as even though the pain receded and the flood of information stopped being so annoying, my eyes still felt a little funny. It was like when you suddenly woke up to a bright light in the room, and it took a few moments for your eyes to adjust. But once it did, wow. I didn't gain night vision or anything like that, but I could literally see the water mana in the air now. Or well, maybe it was better to say I could see where it was, like looking at a stream of water behind an opaque film in a way. That was only part of it, though. When looking at nearby trees, I could literally see the movement of the leaves themselves. Everything had some sort of pressure and density attached to it, and now I had a way to see and track both of them. Even though I was literally looking at it right this second, I would struggle to put into words exactly what I was seeing before me. Either way, this was a great addition to my skill set, and I have a feeling the more I get used to it, the more lethal my abilities would grow. An entire week quickly passed by without too much else happening, and in that time I went into the dungeon exactly 2 more times. On my second attempt, I fought 3 battles in a row before I was forced to take a break due to getting stabbed straight through my thigh by a cat-like creature with 2 horns piercing out the side of its head. I was already a little tired from the previous 2 fights, but I wanted to push myself a bit further, and the environment was a tall grass savanna which allowed for perfect camouflage for the cat. Now I should have been able to track it a whole lot better with my new eyes, and I did for the most part. But the tall grass itself contained mana, and it moved wildly with the wind. There were times when the cat and the grass itself blending together, so I kind of got caught slipping, trusting too heavily in my new senses, and not making sure I was prepared for anything and everything. I probably could have pushed on from that injury, but I never for a second forgot that losing a battle in this dungeon meant death. No need to push that far and hard right now. There were threats on the horizon, yes, but I was improved rapidly every day through training. No need to push the envelope yet. Anyway, after that run, I once again chose another trait as my reward. Depth-bound tendons. Tendons compress and reinforce themselves with layered mana density, allowing them to endure immense strain without tearing. Honestly, the trait was a bit meh. It was a good trait for sure, but it really didn't do much for me personally. My body was already more than attuned with handling immense strain and pressure due to my current class, or rather the current path I walked on. I'm sure without my current gene and class, this would have been a worthwhile trait, but I had no real need for it. I accepted it, of course, and it didn't come with any pain, but it would be the first trait to get switched out as other options present themselves later. The second session went a bit longer, and I made it all the way to battle number 9 before I had to stop simply because I couldn't go any longer. I was tired, beaten, and bruised, but once again, I chose a trait for my reward. Brackish immunity. The immune system evolves centered around the natural purification effects of water mana to become highly adaptable to invasive substances entering the body. All such substances are targeted, isolated, and purified. More mana can be used to speed or improve functions. Now, while depth-bound tendons didn't really do shit for me, brackish immunity was something else altogether. If there was something people feared since many eras ago, it would be poison. Imagine getting an excellent plate of food deposited in front of you that still smelled and tasted as it should, but it was doused in poison. You wouldn't even know how you died. Of course, brackish immunity wasn't strictly for poison, but anything that was seen as harmful to my body, and I'll have to remind myself that it didn't suddenly make me immune to every harmful substance out there. But it would for sure go a long way to keeping me alive if I were to ingest something harmful. Needless to say, it was nothing short of a great trait, and with it, my number of trait slots were now filled once again. but I was no in hurry to try and combine them into a gene. I had long way to go before completing E grade, and I would ensure I had the best combination possible in regard to a gene. Unfortunately for me, though, all of that would have to go on pause since Ladja was getting visitors again. Which of course wasn't new, and a whole host of people have been traveling in and out of Ladja as the days passed, especially with all of the grandpas. Recruitment. Yeah, let's go with that word. Anyway, the number of people here has only been increasing, but this time, it was an organized group on approach, and one that we recognized. Once again, Lieutenant Richards was here, but this time it wasn't just 30 people approaching. It was triple that number at least, and the LT wasn't in front of the group. There was a woman at the front of the large group, and even from where I stood, I could feel that she was firmly in the E grade. But they aren't the only ones who showed up different. While most of my family didn't come this time, only Grandpa, myself, Raycon, and my dad, we were a lot more in number. All 50 of our initial recruits clad in matching armor sets and stood behind the family. They were supposed to have another couple weeks of training or so, but things got sped up a lot and, well, they were short on sleep for a good while. I'm sure there were some complaints, but they were stronger for it, got paid bonuses, and it was damn sure worth it looking at them now. Dad really did his best in training them, which obviously meant he trained himself too, since it wasn't like he was some experienced soldier. They could all handle themselves in the field, and from what I was told, all of the squads knew how to fight decently well together by now. Grandpa, of course, did indeed recruit the extra 100 people, but unfortunately for Grandpa, it was going to take a long time to get all of them up to where the current group were. Just because you did something fast didn't mean it would be good, so while we were pushing a bit, cutting corners wasn't a good thing. Either way, I wasn't too worried about a fight breaking out here. No weapons were drawn on either side, and based on what I could see with my new eyes, it didn't look like anyone was overly tense or itching to attack. For now, at least. Well, let's see what this lady had to say. Well, you must be Mr. Williams, right? The older gentleman with one arm. Her eyes then shifted towards me. And you, well, I don't think we got your name, but you sure gave my soldiers here a fright. So much so that they gave up on a mission without a fight and wouldn't come back without some backup. I sure hope we can keep things a bit level-headed this time around. Level-headed, yet you show up at my doorstep with a small army. An army? No, Mr. Williams, this is no army. You can think of them as something of a personal guard. Central wouldn't let me leave home without them, you see. And where are my manners? I am Major Miller, commander of the Southern Defense Force of the New America Army. Mind sitting down and having a conversation.